90% of positive reviews, and that is definitely enough for you to dive in this first-person story-rich adventure. Find your husband, my hero, find him alive. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. You'll embark on an epic adventure full of whimsy, wonder, and high-powered weaponry. Bullets, magic, and broadswords collide across this chaotic fantasy world brought to life by the unpredictable Tiny Tina, which is your disorderly guide through this realm where rules rarely apply. You'll explore a vast overworld spanning majestic cities, dank mushroom forests, and epic fortresses. You can choose your own multi-class hero and loot, shoot, slash, and cast your way through outlandish monsters and loot-filled dungeons. Take on a quest to stop the tyrannical Dragon Lord and show everyone who's the real boss is. Well, as always, probably not you. You can play it alone or co-op with a friend. Chaotic Great Edition includes full game and additional But Stallion pack, Blight Collar class, 4 dungeons with new bosses, loot and environments, and Dragon Lord pack bonus content. Inmost. This is an emotional and deeply atmospheric narrative-driven puzzle platformer. You will uncover the stories of an adventurous young girl, a stoic knight, and a man in search of answers. You will explore a crumbling, nightmarish landscape, slice through enemies and spring deadly traps in order to escape the evil that awaits. You will have to lure enemies into lethal traps, solve environmental puzzles, and utilize your scythe, hookshot, and pickaxe to avoid a gruesome end. The story is not very long. It will take you about 3 to 5 hours to complete. Literally depends on how dumb you are, because it's a puzzle game. It can work like an IQ test. If you finish it in 3 hours, congratulations. If in 5, well, I have bad news for you.
And you finished it in 10.
No, that's a lie. That's a lie, everyone.
No, it isn't.
Shut up. Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Recently I watched my wife playing it. She's a great fan of the franchise, she even finished Andromeda. I couldn't. So what I gathered is that this is still an awesome game. Well, 3 remastered games in one, but the graphics of the first part are still morally old. So don't expect miracles, these are all the games with not so fancy overhaul as Crysis franchise. First Mass Effect was released in 2007, so really long time ago. Anyway, if you like science fiction space operas, Mass Effect is one of the best there is. It has a great plot, many twisted turns of events, mysteries on every corner, giant robots, giant spaceships, and giant space stations. Everything is giant here. It's also full of great characters as well, and it has about 90% of positive reviews on Steam. By buying Legendary Edition, you will get all 3 remastered Mass Effect games with all the DLCs and other stuff included and remade in one huge game. War Tales. It has been 100 years since the world saw the fall of the once great Edoran Empire at the hands of an unprecedented plague that swept the nation. So prepare to lead a group of characters in a huge open world where combat, death, and thirst for riches will shape and define your day-to-day life. You are not a special chosen one ushering in a new era of peace. Nah, your goal is solely to survive, well, and thrive in this harsh and hostile land. From the most insignificant petty thieves to the land's most notorious figures, there is no such thing as a profit too small to take. You can recruit from the vast array of new companions with numerous unique skill sets and weapon preferences, resulting in a plethora of possible builds. You will accept contracts that will take you on a task to defend, liberate, and save the many inhabitants of the land for money. You are not a hero, remember? Also here you will be able to collect bounties. From the most insignificant pathetic thieves to the land's most notorious figures. There is no such thing as a profit too small to take. Very wise words. Probably many times spoken by Quark from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Terminator Resistance. I remember seeing a trailer of this game a few years ago and I was like,
Nah, this probably will be a flop.
And I ignored it on my false prejudice for years. Why false? Well, it has more than 90% of positive reviews on Steam. Not too far away from overwhelmingly positive titles, so it's almost a masterpiece. The game is a first-person shooter set during the Future War scenario that was only glimpsed in the first 2 iconic movies. The machines are destined to lose, but at what cost? So basically here you will run and gun or sneak and hack through Skynet's defenses, level up your skills and explore a post-apocalyptic world for scraps to trade and craft, also interact with other survivors and change their fates. People on Steam are saying that this is the real Terminator 3, as it should have been. It contains an amazing atmosphere, also interesting story and developed characters. Deliver Us the Moon. This is a single-player adventure sci-fi thriller set in an apocalyptic near future, where Earth's natural resources are depleted. A lone astronaut is sent to the moon on a critical mission to save humanity from extinction. And you know, that astronaut is you, so we are all doomed. The story starts when one fateful night all communications with Earth ceased to exist and the energy source was lost. Now, years later, you assume the role of world's last hope.
Hello everyone, Chaos here, and welcome to another old school RuneScape video. I gave you guys 150 tips and tricks in 2022, 151 tips and tricks in 2023, and we keep the tradition going, as today I have 130 tips and tricks for your RuneScape adventures to start the 2024 on the right foot. Boys and girls, this is not a sponsored segment, but rather me thanking each and every single one of you for interacting with the channel in 2023, which performance-wise completely exceeded my wildest expectations, so thank you so much for that one. I made a little rambly video in the description if you want to, hear more thoughts about video making, what's coming in 2024, but I'm not going to interrupt more of this video. I really hope you enjoy, and if you want to watch that rambly video, I will see you then. For every new subscriber and the like this video receives, I will give my puppy one new toy to play with, and of course a pat on her little head. I appreciate each and every one of you very much, so thanks for helping out with the YouTube overlord. The only disclaimer I have for this video is that if you have watched the previous iterations, there could be a few tips I'm going to repeat only because they are so important. As you can see, this video is also going to be pretty chunky, so without any further ado, I really hope you enjoy, and let's begin. We are going to start with account security once again. If you haven't, make sure to upgrade to a Jagex account for improved security, including passwords that you can put uppercase and special characters in. And no, Jagex is not paying me to promote this. Along with a new Jagex account, I would recommend having an email account you only use for RuneScape and nothing else. With the data leaks happening from time to time, you don't want your email tied to your RuneScape account to be out there. If it does happen, however, make sure to have two-factor authenticator for both your email account and the RuneScape account. This will make it extremely difficult for your account to be compromised with the 2 layers of security. It goes without saying, but be wary of every link you click on, especially if you receive an email that looks like it comes from Jagex. Nowadays, they can look fairly convincing, so never interact with an email you are not expecting. Last but not least, make sure you have a trusty antivirus and scan your computer every now and then. This is not a sponsored segment, but I personally have been using Malwarebytes for several years, and I am extremely happy with their product. Related to account security, we jump onto 5 common scams. If you ever see people buying items for higher than normal, just ignore them. Long story short, you put your item up for trade, and they give you a teleport tab hoping you accept them to go to Camelot. This happened to a stream viewer recently. Make sure you never manually download anything people tell you to, especially if it's a supposed to RuneLite plugin. They will take control of your client and steal all your items if they can. One that I have personally seen before is people asking you to be on a video, or asking you to buy items on the GE because they hit the limit and ask you to add them if they need more. They just want to socially engineer you later on. Another one that has to do with social interaction is people trying to convince you to help them anti-lure someone. You may think you're smarter than them and yoink a few million GP, but trust me, the end goal is just to take you to a PvP world. The stupidest one I still have to mention is avoid gambling bots at all times. They even have other bots interacting with them to make it look legit, but as we all know, it's too good to be true. You will never really outsmart these cockroaches. The next to 10 are some of my favorite RuneLite features. If you hold Alt, you can move your inventory, chat, and minimap around. I'm not going to spend too much time on these because I have a new RuneLite plugins video coming very soon. A plugin I started using recently, not just for my thieving guide, is the one-click Summer Garden. Once all the ghosts have a 0 on them after being caught, you can click on the tree in the middle after an audio cue plays for you to train quicker. The Mage Training Arena plugin is something you won't be using for too long, but this place sucks so much that doing it without the plugin is straight up masochism. It will help you do the activities much quicker so you can get the hell out of it ASAP. The Time Tracker plugin will let you know when certain things are ready, like your crops, compost bins, birdhouses, and much more. You can even configure it in a way to give you a notification to let you know when it's time to run it back. An extremely underrated plugin, at least to my knowledge, is screen markers. You can draw squares on your screen to help you know where you have to click for certain activities. I still use it as a nightmare for the prayer shuffle because I'm still pretty fucking bad at it. If you're still in the early or mid game and you haven't gotten the quest cape yet, get yourself the WikiSync plugin. Once it's synced to your account and you visit the wiki, it will tell you if you meet the quest or skill requirements for a quest or diary. The item charges plugin is pretty straightforward. It will let you know how many charges your items have without needing to right-click on them. This will help avoid embarrassing situations like running out of blowpipe charges at the fight caves. One of the most common questions I get on streams is how to hide certain prayers on the prayer tab. Turn on the prayer plugin, right-click the prayer icon, and then use filter and the reorder options to make the tab look however you want. The ground markers plugin has become an essential tool in recent years for you to know where to stand at all times when scaling or bossing. It's actually so important that it inspired an entire video by Jimmy, which you should definitely go check out. To finish this category, I have a 2-for-1. Get both bank tabs and bank tag layouts to make your bank look like this. I go more into detail during my bank organization video, and I will further talk about it in my upcoming plugins video for 2024. For like the 12 of you who mainly use the mobile client to play, I have a few good ones for you. More recent phones should have a battery saving feature. Turn it off for higher performance but less battery time, or on for it to last longer at slight FPS cost. Some of the best activities to do in mobile are AFK in case you're at work or doing something else that requires low attention. Use this time to train things like woodcutting, fishing, or my personal least favorite, the Nightmare Zone. For the next ones, go to settings and then pop out at the bottom of the list. The first thing you will notice is the skill icon on the top right. This will track your experience between sessions and will only do so on your current device. Taking a page from Moonlight, the mobile client also tracks loot from bossing and other areas, such as scaling resources, so you know exactly how much money you're making when grinding the game on your phone, which is pretty handy. You can also enable the grounded tags option, and you won't see as much text on the screen when you have multiple items on the ground. It also helps for you to see what's on the floor if you are hunting for an important item. By far the best one is a clue helper option. This is basically Jagex telling you where to go and what to do to solve clue scrolls all the time, which has rendered the traditional way of solving them 100% useless and irrelevant. Well, not that anyone liked it. This icon on the left will change the action of your taps when active. This is the best way to drop items when training skills such as fishing, mining, and woodcutting, so you can toss all your items on the ground and continue training. The button will also change how certain items behave. One of the best uses of this is both filling and emptying runecrafting pouches, a coal bag, and a gem bag, just to mention a few. If you train like this on mobile, make sure to double check if this setting helps. You can also enable the game to let you know if you're about to be logged out when skilling for extended periods of time. This notification will also let you know if you have gotten bird nests from woodcutting, for example. Last but not least, some phones have split screen mode, so you can both play RuneScape and, let's say, watch a video on a different part of your screen. This will make the grind a little more bearable, and it's a blessing if you can't play on a PC. We now jump onto general settings. Unless you are at, for example, the Bounty Hunter for points, I recommend having the PK skull prevention toggled on at all times. This way, you are not going to accidentally click on players in the wealthy or be skulled tricked by rats. You can also avoid accidentally attacking NPCs by setting the NPC left click option to always be hidden. This is especially useful at places like RD Knights for left-click pickpocketing, and to avoid gaining combat experience. To become more efficient at PvM, or just the game in general, enable the use of F keys in the settings menu. You can then customize different tabs like inventory, prayer, and magic spells to certain F keys to access them a lot quicker. For some odd reason, you have to enable the option for you to close pretty much any interface with the escape key on your keyboard. This is a lot better than having to click the X button, which is pretty tiny compared to others. A tip I have mentioned before is for you to hide roofs at all times. By going to the settings and disabling roofs when you're outside a building, this way you can see things you can interact with inside like banks or shops. Also in the settings menu, search the word dart and disable the option for you to make them bit by bit. If you do so, you can make darts as fast as possible, and it makes fletching one of the fastest 99s in the entire game, granted you have the money for it. There is also an option for you to use the middle mouse button to move your camera around instead of the arrows on your keyboard. If your mouse allows it, you can also map the middle button to a side button to make it a lot more comfortable. Remember the tap to drop a button during the mobile section? Another tip that makes its way back into this video is the shift click option. Enable the setting to drop items when you click on them by holding shift, and it is a great way to drop items when scaling as well. You can right click the magic icon to enable spell filtering. When it's on, you can click on the filter option below and filter spells based on things like spells you don't have the level 4, teleport spells, utility spells, combat, and much more. Finally, search combat achievements in the settings menu for you to filter combat achievements if you fail them, being able to see if you would have failed the combat achievement even if you already have it, and much more. Okay, let's now jump to all skills, starting with melee. Did you know that the Abyssal Dagger special attack was changed to give it a little bit of love and compete with other weapons in this category? It's definitely a nice weapon to train strength. If you happen to be using the Soul Reaper axe, especially for bossing, make sure to use the special towards the end of the kill to dump the stacks and heal you. Otherwise, you will lose them waiting for the boss to spawn and lose even more HP. At the time of making this video, Jagex is still looking for feedback when it comes to changes and rebalance to things like weapons, most importantly the Fang and the Scythe, which might be changed a bit in case you want to acquire them soon. Thanks to the release of the Phantom Muspa and the Venator bow a year ago, you can now AFK train ranged on something other than Ammonite crabs and the cannon at the training camp north of Ardi. It's definitely a fun weapon to use for AoE damage. Something I learned recently is that the Chinchompa accuracy is based on the style you use and how far away your target is. For example, Short Fuse has 100% accuracy against targets close to you, so make sure to change it depending on what you're doing. If you're lucky enough to have a Zerite crossbow, its passive effect strengthens bolt effects by 10%. This is mainly used to deal 110 damage instead of 100 against the big bosses with enchanted ruby bolts, and has other cool boosting effects. When training prayer by offering bones at an altar, you can both move your inventory by holding Alt like we said before, and use the bone on the bottom right slot in your inventory, since it will be the last one used during your offerings. On the topic of offering bones, the Zealot outfit has a chance of saving bones when being offered at an altar. You obtain these robes at the Shades of Morton activity, but don't take them to the Wildy as you could lose it if PK'd at the wrong time. And speaking of Shades of Morton, did you know that the only way to gain profit through the prayer skill is by cremating shade remains in Morton? The higher the shade you cremate, the better loot from chests open with the keys you get. Jumping onto magic, I'm sure you're familiar with the Imbued Heart. By using 150,000 Ancient S's from the Phantom Muspa, you can turn it into a Saturated Heart. This is basically a divine potion for magic, and you will keep the boost for 5 minutes. Also from the Phantom Muspa, you can obtain an item called an Ancient Icon. If you combine it with an Ancient Staff, you will gain cool additional bonuses when casting Ancient spells, which are further increased with the Quartz Gems from DT2 bosses. Another new item added in 2023 was the Warped Scepter, thanks to the addition of a RuneScape 3 quest by the name The Path of Glufry. This is a trident-like weapon that aims to bridge the gap between the Iban Staff and the Trident of the Seas. A quality of life update made it so you can configure your rune pouch to automatically store runes you obtain from runecrafting to avoid having to bank them. Talk to the magic tutor in Lumbridge and have this setting on at all times. There is now a brand new way to make runes in the Scar after completion of Desert Treasure 2. The Scar Essence Mine mainly aims for Ironmen to have a better time making blood runes, and I might have to make a video on it later, as I can't really fit it in this one. I'm sure a lot of you dreaded the time to train runecrafting to do an achievement diary. But if you wear the full runecrafting outfit, you have a chance to make more runes on an altar, which actually counts towards some of the diary requirements. When training construction, the Mahogany Homes plugin is an absolute blessing when participating in said activity. It will show you where you have to go, what materials you need, and what items in the house you must fix to finish the contract. If doing this, it would be a great idea to finish the quest Lunar Diplomacy to have access to the respective spellbook. If you use the NPC contact spell, you can talk to Amy remotely for another contract without having to go back to Falador. Related to your POH, if you wish to find shooting stars on your own, you can build a telescope and see if there are any stars nearby when they fall. Just make sure to avoid building the telescope on a window looking directly at another wall. When you train agility, did you know that the marks of grace at the RD rooftop don't despawn? This is because they always appear on the same spot, and if you get a new one, it's just basically going to refresh the timer of all existing marks of grace. Did you know that the Ring of Endurance counts as a Saradomin item? I didn't know this until I was doing a Master Clue step that requires talking to the Zami Mage in Varrock, and he rejects you if you're wearing any Saradomin items. Something that has been in the game for quite a long time but didn't remember until recently is that Chasian also features agility courses for you to train in case you want to give them a try. Either that or if you are a Zaya locked Ironman. Recent additions to the game have also given us new potions to use for the Herblore skill. We have potions like Ancient Brews, Menophyte Remedies, and Forgotten Brews. Their effects are decent but not the most efficient to train with. In case you're an Ironman or just looking for more profit, another new item added recently is a scaly blue dragon hide. When using a knife on it, you will get noted blue dragon hide, and it's basically like a giant egg sac you get from Sarachnis. If you're looking to train Hunter in a more interactive way, the herbivore is the way to go. The higher herbivore level, the higher chance at better herbs you get out of every catch. At level 80 Hunter, you should also have a decent herbivore level. For thieving, stealing artifacts from Piscarilius is a fun and engaging activity. To make this slightly faster, teleport to Piscarilius right after asking Captain Khalid for a new task, since it will save you a few seconds instead of running to the houses. Thanks to a few changes to the Achievement Diary rewards, the Pharaoh's Scepter can now hold more charges based on the tier of Desert Diary you complete. This goes up to 100 with the Elite tier, which is super convenient if you're doing Pyramid Plunder. This one has to do with agility, but it's also related to pyramids. If you're doing low-level agility training and money making at the Agility Pyramid, sell the Pyramid Top after every single run, since the item is pretty heavy and will hinder your run energy. When it comes to crafting, a new money-making method I learned about recently is making drift nets from jute fiber at Fossil Island. These will always be needed thanks to drift net fishing, and it's great to make a cash early on. If you train crafting with molten glass by making light orbs, remember that you cannot sell these items and you can't even note them. Once you're done with them, the best idea would be to incinerate them directly from the bank. You can also make money by making gem bracelets, and my tip for this one would be to always check gem prices before buying or selling, as the margin for these items is fairly small, so you have to process them relatively fast. Thanks to Desert Treasure 2 bosses dropping rune and the Dragon Javelin heads, training with them is a lot cheaper nowadays, and even competes with other fletching training methods. This excludes darts, which are still the absolute fastest in the entire game. If you make darts or bolts, you might be clicking each of them once to make a set of 10. If you want to go a little easier, you can double click the darts or bolts, and then the feathers to reduce movement, and it doesn't change speed that much. Finally, if you're also on a tight budget and you want to train fletching, a fairly AFK method features gems. You can use a chisel and cut gems to turn them into dart tips, which are needed to make enchanted bolts, and will always be on demand. If you haven't been paying attention to questing updates, the Path of Gluffery brings the total quest points up to 300, meaning that we now have an additional block slot for Slayer, so you can avoid another one of your least favorite tasks. When a superior Slayer monster appears, you can start attacking it right away, even if you're in single-weight combat area. They take priority over your current target, and you cannot be attacked by anything else after engaging. If someone comes up to you during your Dust Devil task and asks you to take your Slayer helmet off to see your haircut, don't be a noob and don't fall for it. You will almost instantly die due to the Dust Devils dealing massive damage if you're not wearing it. For Hunter, my biggest tip that's only relevant until the release of Valimor would be to wait to level up so you can make use of the Hunter Guild. This is going to bring massive changes to the skill, starting with Hunter contracts. When doing birdhouse runs, always take 40 seeds with you. This way, if you still have seeds after setting up your last house, it means you forgot to add seeds to one of them. It's extremely frustrating coming back and realizing you forgot to add some. If you want to switch it up and train Hunter via aerial fishing, I would personally always click on the fishing spot closest to the island so your bird catches the fish faster. These spots farther away will take a lot longer to reach, wasting a few ticks. After a recent update, the Motherlode mine now has more veins on the lower level. Previously, you needed to mine some rocks to get to a few veins west of the water wheels, but you don't need to do that anymore, which is slightly faster. Also, after the whole Duke Succulus AFK salt mining got nerfed, shooting stars is a lot more AFK since the amount of people on it doesn't really affect the time it takes to deplete. And as an added bonus, stars can no longer spawn in lower tiers for more AFK time. And speaking of nerfs, if you were one of the people griefing Guardians of the Rift by just AFK mining, this has also been affected and you can only gain experience for 250 fragments. This aims to reduce the amount of useless people in the room. Another great quality of life added to the game was the ability to make the same item at an anvil by pressing the space bar. This was to add some consistency with other actions such as fletching and crafting, so we are swapping a click for a keystroke. If you're looking to train smithing with Giant's Foundry, always use the two types of metal available at your level. These are called alloys, which are more difficult to work with, but will yield more experience and reputation per hour. Once you unlock all of the molds at the Giant's Foundry and you wish to continue training, you can use the wiki to look at the best mold combination for each sword commission you receive. Some are not as obvious, so it helps out a lot when starting. We move on to fishing, and if you're a main account, I would strongly suggest not to training at minnows. Sharks have massively decreased in price because of bots, so you're not gonna make as much cash. Any iron account should definitely still do this for sharks. One of the more interesting fishing methods for free-to-play champions is within the ruins of Camdozel. I'm not well versed on fishing training methods here other than fly fishing at Barbarian Village, so this is just to do if you want a new location. Something I also learned recently is that if you wear a crystal harpoon at Temporos, you have a chance to catch a crystallized harpoon fish. This gives less points but more experience per catch, as they cannot be cooked. One of the most popular cooking training methods is making jugs of wine. You can use grapes and jugs of water in quick succession to wait for a big XP drop. If you log out and back in on time, you can save the XP drop and continue the session. However, the fastest way to train cooking is by doing something called one-tick karamblan. It is recommended to do this at the Myths Guild, and you have to use a karamblan at a range every tick while holding down the number 2 key. Finally, as most of you know, there's a higher chance of successfully cooking food at ranges as opposed to fires. If you use the Hosirius kitchen instead, you will have an even higher chance of a successful cook thanks to its passive effect. Old school RuneScape now has a truly AFK fire making method. Make a fire, and then right-click it for a new option called Add Logs to the Fire. You will add logs in your inventory for it to slowly burn, but each one will give you 33% experience for the log. One of the best spots to train fire making traditionally is at the Grand Exchange. Go to these spots close to the path between the GE and the castle, and by burning all of the logs you will end up in one tile away from the bank to rinse and repeat. Don't forget that after completion of making friends with my arm, you have access to Eternal Fires. This includes passive effects to avoid having stats drained above Godwar's dungeon, food not rotting in the Mortimer swamp, and much more. The woodcutting plugin has built-in tools to help you with all your forestry events. Even the second round of events can now be done brainlessly by just clicking on the highlighted boxes after interacting with them at least a few times for a solution. The clothes pouch is an item that can be attached to a forestry kit, and you can store either a lumberjack or forestry outfit in it. This allows you to gain passive effect of either set clothes while rocking your usual fashionscape when woodcutting. Another set of new items from forestry are two-handed axes. Their passive effect makes it so you receive 10% more experience, but a 20% chance of not receiving a log when chopping. This obviously means more AFK and more experience. When you do your farm trips now, just in case you forgot to wear your magic secateurs, their effects should still trigger even if it's in your inventory. I have no idea why this change was added, as it's not really that difficult to remember. Make sure to plant expensive seeds on patches that cannot catch the seeds, which are the Troll Stronghold, Vice, and Hosidius. You might still want to add super or ultra compost on them for increased yield, but they won't die at all. If you get a farming contract you are not happy with, you can simply choose a lower tier contract. This means that if you are on the lowest type of contract already, you can't really do much about it, so hopefully you don't get a fruit tree task. We now jump onto PvM. For the Phantom Uspa, if the first face is green, the first special attack will be the teleport around the room. If the first face is brown, the first special will be the spikes following you around, so you can plan around this. For the teleporting special, if you stand on this tile quick enough, you will not be hit by any orb. You can still get hit if you take a long time to get here, and you can find the tile in my Muspa guide, and it's a must-have for this boss. If you want the Muspa to spawn faster, grab your loot and leave the instance to come back once again. For some odd reason, a lot of bosses take too long to respawn, so it's just quicker to leave and start the fight once again. To make the new single combat wildy bosses more balanced, Artio can now be killed with Mage more efficiently. Prior to a recent update, it had fairly high magic defensive stats, which made it pretty annoying to even freeze him in his place. When hunting Spindle, it's a little more convenient to do so using melee. When it does the spiderweb attack, you will be quickly damaged when standing on it, so if you're using melee, you will naturally follow the spider around, avoiding this mechanic. Finally, for Calvarion, when it's doing the transition from purple to orange, you can stand in the middle of the circle of lightning to start attacking as soon as possible. This is a lot faster than moving away from lightning and coming back. An extremely common question on stream is how to know where the monsters are going to spawn during the fight caves. Get yourself the FC Spawn Predictor plugin to see where the next wave of monsters will appear to prepare for the set. I also recommend a plugin called Ground Object Hider. Copy the numbers in the description on the settings of the plugin to hide all the bright red in the Tazar area, which helps a whole ton by not causing a seizure if you're here for longer than 1 hour. Finally, if you're just getting into the fight caves and Jad, remember that the mage attack also plays as soon as the attack starts, whereas the ranged attack sound plays only after you get hit, so ideally pray ranged first when you start. The Theater of Blood entry mode saw a number of changes to make it a lot easier and more forgiving to players. The most important being unlimited attempts and healing items if you die. Hardcore Ironmen will still lose their status if they die here. For the Calphite Queen, if you are using the Lunar Spellbook for more DPS with Vengeance, make sure to go in there with Protect from Melee active, Otherwise, the Kalphite Guardians could hit you and waste the vengeance. If you didn't know, the Kalphite Queen now drops the Dragon Pickaxe, and it's another reason for their massive drop in price along with the new baby versions of the Wildy bosses. It's a 1 in 400 drop if you're feeling lucky and don't want to go to the Wildy. Jagex made the Easyscape even easier, and this time around, the Corrupted Hunlef makes a particular sound when it's about to change combat styles. I understand the visual cue when the transition happens, but this one was a little bit too much. Time for Desert Treasure 2 bosses, starting with the Leviathan. If the first set of rocks appears west and east, the first special attack will be lightning. If the rocks are north and south, the first special will be debris. For the enraged phase at 20%, the Abyssal Protector, which is the orb, will appear northwest if no rocks are blocking the spawn. If there are rocks, it will appear northeast instead, going clockwise until it finds an empty location. For the enraged phase, it's recommended to bring a web weaver bow to be done with it super quick. If you don't have one, bring a blowpipe since you will be almost 100% accurate if you walk along the orb, and the faster DPS the better. For Vardorvis, avoid starting the fight with a special attack. It will either receive massively reduced damage or completely tank it. Hit him once, and then do the second hit with a special attack if you have items like a Voidwaker or Claws. If you hog the walls when fighting Vardorvis, you will always skip the spikes coming out of the ground. He still does the attack, but for some odd reason spikes cannot spawn in these locations, and it's recommended to always stay here. Download a plugin called Vardorvis Projectiles. This makes it so you can change how the projectiles look, giving them the chambers or TOA projectiles for the ranged and magic styles. This is especially important for the Awakened version. For the Whisperer, it is recommended to bring in a Cursed Scepter and do a special at the beginning of the fight. If you have a Tunican Shadow, avoid doing this as the magic defense reduction is almost negligible because of your crazy accuracy. Even if you want to try something new, fighting the Whisperer at melee distance is 100% impossible because of her insane damage if you get close to her. A few people playing Leagues 4 with melee combat relic were pretty sad when learning this. When you fight the Whisperer, remember that prayer is drained quicker when you are in the Shadow Realm. It helps memorizing the special attacks and leaving as soon as possible to save on prayer, and this is almost mandatory for the Awakened version. For Duke Succulus, the tiles right next to the mushrooms will always be safe from shadows that can stun and damage you. Of course, if you want to AFK inside the instance, it would be better to do it near a door, but it's just another option. When you're harvesting mushrooms, you can tick manipulate them, and grab a second one automatically after using a pestle and mortar on one of them. It's not insanely useful, but definitely saves a little bit of time during preparation phase. Finally, if you click on either mushroom spot after you defeat the Duke, you will safely go to the starting location by completely skipping the laser since the fight won't even have started by the time you reach these spots. And now for a few random ones to close out the 130. One of the best updates in recent memory was that the rune pouch not becoming empty after death. It was such a pain claiming your items and filling your pouch once again, but that's a thing of the past. You may now use a special attack orb in the wilderness, and you no longer need to go to the combat tab to activate a weapon's special effect. This is slightly more convenient if you're doing a little bit of bossing or Wildy Slayer. If you visit the hairdresser, you now have more options to rock a new haircut based on whatever you want your character to look like. I would rock a new haircut, but my character is almost always wearing something that would not let me see his hair. If you play Bounty Hunter, be careful with people trying to kill you unfairly by casting Fire Surge and another one doing some sort of special attack. This happened to me and was a little frustrating since these cockroaches wouldn't stop. And finally, by doing the hard Wildy Diary, you no longer have a teleport delay when you are at the Revenant Caves, for which for some reason Jagex thought it was not a human-like reaction to teleport as soon as you saw a PKer. It's pretty neat. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this chunky video. Thank you so much for watching and for making it this far. If you did, leave a comment with your #1 tip for old school RuneScape you didn't see, or just your favorite one from the video. If you do so, include the term RSN in your comment, along with your RuneScape name, and we will pick a random person on Friday's stream to win a bond. A massive thank you to all my channel members for going the extra mile and supporting us. My wife, my puppy, and I cannot thank you enough for it. If you want to be part of this list of legends, click the join button below and see all the cool perks you can get by supporting the channel monetarily. In the next one, we might talk about the future of old school RuneScape regarding a few combat changes that could potentially make their way into the game. I hope you have an amazing day, have an amazing week, and I will see you then. Peace. Hello everyone, Chaos here, and welcome to another old school RuneScape video. Last year we started strong with 150 tips and tricks for the game, and today I bring you 151 more for you to put to use in your adventures. No matter where your account is in terms of progress, I'm certain you'll learn something new. Just like the previous one, as you can see, this video will be fairly long, so the only thing I will do before we get in with the tips is to tell you to subscribe to the channel and to give it a like. For every new subscription, my puppy will get a kiss. So, let's begin. The first 5 involve your account and how secure it is. Whether it be new or old, make sure to use a unique email with a unique password as well as 2-factor authenticator, and do the same for your RuneScape account to lock your stuff down. Make sure to save important information regarding your account if it ever gets compromised. Save information like date of creation, internet service providers, previous passwords, and save receipts if you buy membership or bonds. More recently, Jagex created their own game launcher from where you can play old school RuneScape and RuneScape 3 alike. They offer great tools, but most importantly, it has better password structure for stronger security. The reason I say this is because at the time of making this video, and honestly for the foreseeable future, old school RuneScape passwords are not case sensitive. So make sure to have a good password with lowercase letters and numbers. Now, I'm sure you've heard horror stories about people falling for fake emails. On your screen, you will see a list of official Jagex addresses you will get emails from, and they will generally call you by your username, but it doesn't hurt to double check. Our next 5 tips are about common scams from more to less believable. If you go on Twitch and see a popular streamer announcing they are quitting, it is a phishing scam which will take you to a fake Osrs website for your login information. Extremely similar to the previous one, if you see people in the game saying that they are quitting and you need to watch a video to enter a giveaway, said video will also contain a phishing link to steal your details. Don't even bother reporting them, they're cockroaches and they're gonna pop out every second. When you go to the Grand Exchange, you will see people wearing this outfit. 99% of the time these are gambling bots which will advertise great payouts, but in the end they will almost always come out on top. Just report them and move on. You can also see people buying items for more than what they are actually worth, so when you show the item they will ask if you want coins or tokens. They will tell you to meet their main in Camelot and offer a teleport, hoping you accept with your item still on the trade screen. The final scam people commonly fall for are intricate lures which socially engineer to gain your trust, like asking you to wear something for a video. The end goal is to take you to a PvP world and kill you if you have valuable items on you, so don't even listen to them. Up next we have resources for you to learn even more about this wonderful game. Up first we have the official Osrs wiki. The website has every imaginable detail about old school RuneScape, from where to find items, to quest requirements, to moneymakers, and much more. You can find all of these links in the description, and the next one is a damage spreadsheet calculator you can download from Google Drive. Input however many combinations of items for what monster you're fighting for your best loadout. This is a great time to plug our own Discord so you can interact with me and our amazing community. Come join us to chat and also have the occasional 99 parties, boss mass events, and of course the general guidance for the game. The main Osrs Discord is also a great place to visit, as you will get all official information from Jagex. The best part about it is when something goes wrong in old school RuneScape, you can see almost everyone flaming and memeing in all the channels. For the last one, well, you're on it right now. It doesn't matter if you want to learn where to find an item spawn or more intricate guides for things like raids. If you have a question, you can probably find what you need on YouTube, and this channel has a ton of great guides. Up next we have 5 friends chat which will help you out with specific activities. Osrs SOA will help you find partners for Shield of Arav and even the Heroes quest since it requires 2 people to complete. It will take you a while, but you will almost always find them. You can go to the Star Miners friends chat in order to locate shooting stars and even call them out yourself. This activity is pretty cool to do with other people, and it's a great way to train mining, although won't provide huge experience per hour. Have you ever wondered which worlds people have splashing Arty Knights on them to stand still as you fiddle their pockets? Thieving Host has you covered. Ask for a current world to go join them and to train thieving with just a few spam clicks. The chat Deliver Items will have people willing to bring you supplies at different spots of the map, granted you pay them for your servers with money or drops. A great place to use it would be Dagon Kings, since the walk there is abysmal. And finally, you can go to Casual BA in order to find the teams for Barbarian Assault, but keep in mind that doing this with randoms is still pretty painful, so why not join our Discord and run this activity with our team of legends for a faster torso. Alright, plugs aside, now we have 10 tips for your interface. If you right click on your spellbook, you can activate a filter for you to see a new button. You can then show or hide combat or utility spells, teleports, and even filter by spells you have the runes for. I mentioned this one in 2022, but a small reminder that the minigame teleports were moved to the clan tab, and then the grouping section. Fun fact, there are some activities listed here, but you can't even teleport there, such as the Dagon of Kings. If you want to vote on the latest poll, you don't have to go to a bank, even though I like doing so. All you need to do is open the Account Management tab, then the Community section, and click on the poll button to have your say in the future updates remotely. If you go to the list of worlds, you can right-click them in order to add the 2 of them to your favorites. If you want to change them, right-click a favorite world and then clear it to make room for the new one, so choose wisely. Go ahead and click on the Accept Aid button to be able to receive aid from players, like being invited to a clan, potion sharing, being teleported with a group teleport, and much more. You can turn it off if you don't want to be bothered by such things. When you go to a 99 party, or if you want to spice up your chat a little more, you can use commands before your messages to make them a different color, an alternate color, and even make the text move or shake. You can see some of the commands on screen right now. Another repeat from the previous video, but way too good not to mention again. Go ahead and check the skull prevention on the settings page. This way, you're not going to be skull tricked in the wilderness for smelly rats to trick you for your items. While you're on your settings menu, go to the controls section to set up your F keys. This way, you can switch between your inventory, prayer, and spellbook, just to name a few, all with the use of your F keys to avoid unnecessary clicks and to play better. With the addition of combat achievements, you can turn off some spam notifications telling you that you failed a specific challenge. On the other hand, you can make it so you are told if you beat an achievement again, even if you already have it. For the final one in this category, go to the gameplay section of the settings for you to turn on or off some of the camera effects during gameplay. This includes removing the camera shaking at barrows, fishing trawler, and much more to avoid having a seizure. We now move on to 10 more powerful RuneLite plugins you must use in 2023. And the first tip is, well, what is RuneLite? It's an official third-party client to play with tons of extra tools, but make sure to download it from the official website or runelite.net. Next we have a 2-for-1. Get both the bank tags and the bank tag layout to be able to set your bank like never before. The process is pretty simple, but way too long to mention here, so go watch my video to learn how to do it efficiently. Another repeat from the previous video is inventory tags, and it's because people still ask about it during my streams. With it, you can add any color outline to your objects by shift right-clicking on them and picking whatever color you want for them. Same thing with the menu entry swapper. By shift right-clicking on items like in your inventory, your gear, and even shop items to name a few, you can change the left and the shift-click option to then maximize efficiency and can be used at a ton of places. With NPC indicators, you can tag items around RuneScape to show what tiles they occupy on the map. You can do this with shift right-click on the monster or manually adding their names to the list in the plugin settings. Similar to that, with a tile indicator plugin and by checking an option that says highlight true tile, you will see where your character truly is at all times to get better movement mechanics. This is crucial for many activities in the game later down the road. Next we have player indicators. And I personally use this when I go to the wilderness to show players when I'm doing things like hunting for ecumenical keys. You can also highlight friends and clan members to spot them automatically. A great plugin for the fight caves is called FC Spawn Predictor. It will tell you where all the monsters in the fight caves are going to spawn based on a set rotation. And it's actually great to improve your times, and even if you're getting started. You simply cannot do the Tombs of a Mascot without the Tombs of a Mascot plugin. I mean, you can, but it just gives you so much utility, it would be silly not to have it. It will help you in pretty much every puzzle room, especially the Kefri memory puzzle. The final plugin for now is called WikiSync. If you have it, you can then go to the Osrs wiki, visit any quest or achievement diary page, and it will automatically tell you if you meet the requirements for a quest or an achievement diary. Now we start the combat section with a good one, and it is that after 10 minutes on a specific area where there's aggressive monsters, they will lose interest on you. The RuneLite plugin NPC aggression timer will help with this information. As you all know, there are many level boosts in RuneScape, both visible and invisible. Invisible boosts will allow you to do things such as cast spells you don't have the level for, but this doesn't work on weapons, so don't try to cheat the system. When you're fighting monsters in single combat areas, for example by having a cannon, if you start attacking a monster that's far away, you can be interrupted by one that's closer to you, which can be a little annoying. This one is a little more advanced, but when fighting enemies, especially from a distance, they will always try to align with you based on their southwestern tile. They will prioritize horizontal movement and then vertical so you can safe spot them. In May of 2022, weapons in Old School RuneScape had their level requirements changed based on weapon rebalance proposed a long time ago. If you haven't played the game in a while, go and check your weapons and if you can still wear them. When you're training ranged, make sure to stick to a short bow for your early levels. Longbows have slightly more accuracy but will be a lot slower, which is not that great. Use short bows until you switch to a crossbow, a blowpipe, a bofa, or a T-bow. When it comes to armor, Armadillo may sound like a good option as it's second best in slot, but it's actually a noob trap. You're much better off with God D-Hide for you to work your way towards Missouri, which is the best ranging armor in the game. When you talk to the range tutor in Lumbridge, you can ask them to have your arrows automatically go to your quiver when you pick them up, in case you use an Avos accumulator and it fails to retrieve them for you. So, activate it as soon as possible. When using a blowpipe, you can't even put poison darts on it regardless of the tier or the price. This is because you will already have a chance to venom your target, so putting poison darts in there is pretty redundant. And speaking of the blowpipe, when you use it in combination with a serpentine helm, you have a 100% chance to venom your target, granted it hits. This is pretty useful at some places for consistent damage, and venom is a lot more powerful. Go back to the combat tutors in Lumbridge, but this time talk to the magician. You will be able to toggle an ability to automatically put runes in your rune pouch whenever you pick them up, so you can save on inventory. Speaking of the rune pouch, with the release of the Tombs of a Mascot, an untradeable drop from the raid made it so you can upgrade your rune pouch into a divine rune pouch. It holds 4 types of runes instead of 3, and you need 75 crafting to make it. With one of the most recent additions being Secrets of the North, you can fight the Phantom Mospa boss, which drops Ancient Essence. By combining 150,000 of these to an imbued heart, it will turn into a saturated heart, which works like a divine potion. If you are in the Lunar Spellbook and train magic with a spell called Plank Make, you can click on the spell once to do it automatically. Or you can manually click on them to do it a lot faster. Just keep in mind this is fairly click intensive. And finally for magic, remember that different staves can autocast spells on different spellbooks. For example, the Slayer Staff can autocast Crumble Undead, the Nightmare Staff can autocast Ancients, and the Kodai Wand can't cast Archaeal spells. Up next we have a Prayer. Just like Plank Make, if you take your bones to either a Gilded Altar or a Chaos Altar, you can manually click on the bones to use them there to go through your inventory a lot faster for more experience. With the Archaeus spellbook rework, we had spells added called Demonic Offering and Sinister Offering. Respectively, you can offer up to 3 ashes and bones for prayer experience if you don't want to use altars or if you don't have access to them. By completing the quest Spirits of the Elid, you will be able to pray at the Elidness statue at Narda. It's like an Ornate pool in your POH, and it's recommended to have the Elite Desert Diary for unlimited teleports there. And it also overheals your HP. Speaking of overheals, there's an item called the Ancient Mace. By doing its special attack, you will be able to overheal your prayer based on how much you hit. It's great to do activities like the Inferno where every prayer point counts. And finally, there's a technique called prayer flicking, which has you turning prayers on and off at specific intervals to save on prayer or not use any at all. I'll go more into detail about this on another video, so check it out after this one. Let's now talk about combat achievement updates. By completing at least the easy tier, you will get extra warrior tokens at the Warriors Guild and extra points per pest control game at any boats. Not really worth it in my opinion, but the more you know. If you finish the medium tier, you will start having increased cannonball capacity for your dwarf multi-cannon. The smallest upgrade starts at 35, and it's going to scale all the way up to 60 with the completion of the Elite Diary. Also for the medium tier, as long as you wear your Gomez hilt in the Barrows Brothers tombs, your prayer will never drain. This is especially useful for lower levels, where you typically want to stay there for longer. When you complete the hard tier, you will need 50% less points to imbue items at the Nightmare Zone and at Soul Wars. This is especially useful if you die with items that need an imbue, or if you want to refund your points to sell your items back to the GE. Last one for now, if you complete the Elite tier, your Bracelets of Slaughter and Expeditious will have a small chance of fully regenerating when you use their final charge. It's not much, but whenever it activates, it's going to be a nice hit of dopamine. Now, let's move on to Slayer. We all know the Black Mask is a key item for this skill. By imbuing it at the Nightmare Zone or Soul Wars, you will get extra bonuses for both ranged and magic. Otherwise, it only works for melee. Something I recently learned is that you cannot have a Wilderness task if you already have a task from the other Slayer Masters. This works the other way around, and you must finish the Wildy Slayer task before going for another. When finishing tasks, you will get more points according to your streak task for numbers 10, 50, 100, 250, and finally 1000. If you want to amass a big amount of points, you can use a technique called tutorial skipping, which we've mentioned before. If you are looking for a specific task, because of how Slayer Masters and their assignments work mathematically, you can go to a specific one for better chances at what you are looking for. For example, the best chance at a Fire Cape task would be with Neve and Steve. And finally, when the lower Slayer Masters assign a specific monster, remember there are a lot of variants to different monsters for you to have many options. For example, if you're assigned zombies, you can kill undead chickens and cows north of Port Phasmatis. And now time for the best skill in the game. For runecrafting, we have a new pouch which is called the Colossal Pouch. You get them with a drop from Guardians of the Rift called the Abyssal Needle, and use it with all 4 previous pouches. It holds a whopping 40 essence. Remember how the pouches were only obtainable from the Abyss? Well, now you can get them at Guardians of the Rift. Every time you loot the rewards Guardian, you have a 1 in 9.3 chance of obtaining them, and you will always get one if you don't have one already. On the same note, remember how the Dark Mage in the Abyss or NPC contact was the only way to fix your pouches? Well, with the Abyssal Pearls from Guardians of the Rift, you can also repair them, and again, it is a safe way to do so to avoid death in the Abyss. From this minigame, you can get an item called the Abyssal Lantern. By adding different logs to it, you can have different effects that will aid you in the minigame. For earning extra points to your pouches never degrading inside the game. When you keep looting the rewards Guardian, if you get duplicate unique items such as Abyssal Dies or Lanterns, you can sell them to the NPC next to your bank for more Abyssal Pearls and take you closer to your current goal. Another item you are looking for at Guardians of the Rift are intricate pouches, which are basically extra loot. From them, you can get a blue amulet, and by giving it to the Lumberj guide, he will give you an amulet for unlimited teleports to the minigame. With Abyssal Pearls, you can buy the runecrafting outfit called Raiments of the Eye. Each piece provides a 10% chance of crafting more runes, and with the full outfit, the bonus jumps to 60%. This way, you can do the achievement diaries at earlier levels. The final Guardians of the Rift tip is that in order to unlock the full activity, you will need the quests Lost City for Cosmic Runes, Troll Stronghold for Law Runes, Morning's End Part 2 for Death Runes, and Sins of the Father for Blood Runes. And speaking of blood, a new item by the name Blood Essence will give you more blood runes when crafting them with whatever method you choose. They are a must-have item in your inventory if crafting them at the True Blood altar or at Zeah. Finally, for runecrafting, if you keep using your pouches, the biggest one will degrade and will hold less essence. Apparently, if you fix the large one, if you keep using it, it has a chance to vanish, so fix them as soon as possible. For construction, you can move your rooms around with a construction interface. You may switch their places, rotation, and it's a great way to organize your house instead of destroying rooms and rebuilding them. On screen you are seeing the quote-unquote useless rooms for any POH. These serve no purpose other than having fun with your friends, but let's be honest, you probably don't have any and you're the only person who visits your POH. As powerful as the menu entry swapper plugin is, it doesn't work for construction training because it would be way too broken. Sadly, you still have to stick to destroying your wrists by clicking remove and build like we've been doing for years. There's an odd farming training method that involves bag the plants and supposedly gives a lot of farming experience. To my knowledge, this is only good for the early levels, so you won't have to do this weird method for long, or not at all. If you don't want to get 99 construction, 84 is all you need to boost to level 92 for the highest portal nexus with a +5 spicy stew boost and a crystal saw. For the Spirit Tree and Fairy Ring combination, you need 90, since the Crystal Saw is not going to work for that one. When it comes to agility and the max level for content that's not a 99, level 93 is all you need. This grants access to the shortcut that takes you from the cave system under Canifis to the True Blood altar. It's a bit steep, but hey, it's not 99. Agility levels will dictate how fast your run energy regenerates. This is actually exponential, and you can get a pretty good boost at level 60 or even 50, and any level after that will give you more run energy, but not as much as the lower levels. Stamina potions are a staple item to keep running around, but there are more items that will give you run energy if you can't get them. On screen you are seeing some of these items, and one of the best ones is a strange fruit you can steal from fruit stalls. The Ring of Endurance can be charged with stamina potions, and the buff will only work when drinking said potions. If you use the agility cape benefit while wearing the ring, for example, it's not going to extend your stamina boost. I didn't know this until recently, so here you go. Apparently, if you click the run energy orb next to the map at a specific interval, it will make your run energy last longer. It's pretty tedious, so I personally just scoped through it, and I got this one from one of Soup's RuneScape Myth videos. Yoink! Last year, I told you there's an NPC at Narda that cleans all your herbs for you, and even makes unfinished potions after some tiers of the Desert Diary. But there's another NPC that crushes all your items for you and saves a lot of time. Just like Prayer, the Arceus spellbook now has a new spell called The Grime. With it, you are able to clean herbs in your inventory, granted you have both the magic level required for them and the runes to cast the spell. Some herbs can even give you profit. For thieving, Jagex is planning to increase the number of coin pouches you can hold before having to open them all. People wanted them completely removed, which is not possible for now, but a nice incentive for you to do your diaries. At level 95 thieving and with a medium RD diary completed, you will be able to pickpocket RD knights with a 100% success rate. There's another friends chat you can find where people splash arty nights with no interruptions, which I've used before. Crafting is normally seen as an expensive skill to train, but by crafting jewelry and other gem items, you can even profit when training the skill. Just keep in mind that it's going to be pretty slow, but definitely a nice alternative to make some cash. We've talked about the Colossal Pouch and the Divine Rune Pouch before, and to make these you will need 75 and 56 crafting respectively. Not only can you make jewelry with it, but also a ton of useful other untradeable items for your account. And now 2 quick ones for fletching. This is a pretty simple one, but remember that the higher tier the logs you turn into arrow shafts, you will obtain more of them for a specific log. This is pretty useful if you're an ironman looking to make arrows. From 2 logs you can also make wooden shields. You may use the base version for defensive stats, but you can combine some of them with dragon leather to make ranging shields. The stats are not great, but it's an okay alternative for an offhand item. When doing your birdhouse runs, you can pretty much use any type of seed to set them up. They have absolutely no effect on the loot since the tier of log is what decides how many nests you will get, but a nice use for commonly low-level seeds. As you know, there are hunter outfits in the game like Larupia, Horned Grahawk, and Saber-Toothed Kayet. Contrary to what they look like, they have absolutely zero effect on hunter, even on their respective creatures. This makes them only useful for Fashionscape. When you have the mining level required for it, by training at the mining guild, you can get unidentified minerals you can trade for 3 tiers of mining gloves. These have cool effects that are pretty niche, but it's nice to have for further training. If you go to the Motherlode mine and start getting nuggets, the order of unlocks I recommend goes as follows: the bigger sack, upstairs area, full prospector, coal bag, gem bag, and then use any remaining nuggets on bags of gems for more profit. Once you have your ore, we will now move up to smithing. As you know, you have 50% chance of successfully smelting iron ore into bars at a furnace. If you use the spell Superheat, this will go up to 100% and you will also gain magic experience. If you don't want to use magic, there's an item called the Ring of Forging. By wearing it, it's going to use up a charge every time you smelt a piece of iron ore into an iron bar. It will Hello everyone, Chaos here, and welcome to This is going to be the very first video of its kind. Understandably so, it may not be as popular. Well, I was certainly not expecting that. Hello everyone, Chaos here, and welcome to another old school RuneScape video. And this week it's all about account goals, so I will give you my top 10 goals for early, mid, late, and the end game that could apply to pretty much every player and that are a pretty good baseline to judge how well your account is doing in terms of progress. So if you want to catch every video, a subscription with notifications on would be really appreciated, as well as a like on the video to let me know you enjoyed it. As always, here's the structure for today's video. First, I will show you the results of the contest I gave you guys on Friday's video, which actually surpassed my wildest expectations. Second, I will give you my infamous disclaimers, which I will have for all of these goal videos to establish a few ground rules. Up next, we will have my personal top 10 list for early game goals, and finally, I will give you a summary as to what I personally think your account should have in order for you to be past the early game in old school RuneScape. As you can tell, this video won't be just the top 10, and we have a lot more content on it, so if you only care about the goals, feel free to skip ahead by using the chapters on the video display. However, I love making these videos, so if you guys want to watch all of it, that would be greatly appreciated. So with that being said, let's jump into the first part of the video, which are the bond winners. Now, I will take a quick minute of your time to share with you the winners of Friday's comment contest regarding the quitting story. To give you a reminder, this is what the contest was. If you guys have watched until this point, say KBD Pet, but not only that, in your comment you have to tell me if you have ever thought about quitting RuneScape and why you have not, or if you actually quit, tell me why. And after 363 eligible comments with the words KBD Pet and your quitting experiences, here are the winners being drawn live. And it is now time to pick a winner. I'm not going to take too much time away from you guys, and we are going to put this link in pickawinner.co. We are going to use keyword filter for KBD, and remember that you have to write KBD as well as your little quitting story. And after 450 comments, we have 363 comments that are available for the contest. So let's go ahead and pick the very first winner Oh my god, this is Microsoft, and yeah, thank you for this story. I'm not gonna read it in the video, I'm going to read it on my own, but you are the winner of the first bond. And next we are going to have Razorus X, who says, KBD Pet, I have taken plenty of breaks, but I have never quit. Very nice, thank you to you two for commenting, and by the time you watch this, I would have already commented on your video asking for your RuneScape name, and you guys are the winners of 2 bonds, or I guess 1 bond each. So now, back to the video. So congratulations to Microsoft and Razor X. If you guys are watching this, I already replied to your comment on Friday's video asking for your RuneScape name to hand over your bond. We have another contest on this video coming up, so let's continue on with the video. And now, of course, it's time for my infamous disclaimers, and this time around there are only 3 short ones, so we can get on with the video fairly quickly. Number 1, and as I've said many times before, remember that this is just my personal opinion and that it could be heavily different from yours, but we are going to do something very interesting about that in a little bit. For number 2, some parts in the top 10 will have multiple items or unlocks, and this is because they go well together, and honestly putting them separately wouldn't have made much sense. And finally, remember that these are just a few general goals for new players or new members that they could look into to improve their accounts a whole ton when starting out. Also, these were planned for an unrestricted account in mind, but I can see these still being useful for Ironman. I don't know about you guys, but I think these disclaimers are getting a bit quicker, right? So you can let me know in the comments. Alright, with these out of the way, let's begin. Starting off at number 1, we are going to do a few quests that are going to give you a ton of nice starting experience and that will give you a general feel for the game. First of all, I recommend doing all of the free-to-play quests as most of them are super easy and short, including the Knight's Sword, which will grant many smithing levels if your level is low enough. Next, go for the Druidic Ritual to unlock the Herblore skill. Then do the Witch's House for some easy hit points levels, and with a higher hit points levels, you are then going to do the Waterfall quest for a ton of easy experience in both attack and strength. You can then focus on Plague City to get some mining experience, Tears of Gothics to unlock the Tears of Gothics minigame, which will give you decent experience on your lowest skill every week. You should also do the mini-quest Enter the Abyss for some runecrafting experience and to access the Abyss. You are then going to do the Animal Magnetism quest to acquire the Avas Accumulator to save a ton of time picking up arrows and bolts. And finally, not a quest, but you should do the Varrock Museum Basement quiz for 1000 experience in both Slayer and Hunter. Now, don't worry, this is by far the longest topic out of all of them, but all of these quests will open many doors for early progression in your account. Coming in at number 2, we have a pretty obvious one, and you should get level 10 agility, preferably at the Gnome Stronghold. With this level, you will start to have access to rooftop agility training to earn 260 marks of grace to buy the full graceful outfit at the Rogue's Den. You probably see hundreds of people wearing this each day, and it's because it recharges run energy way quicker when wearing the full set, and it's especially useful at the beginning of your journey. So put everything aside and train some agility for this nice and useful set. At number 3, we have something that will start making you tons of money even at lower levels. It is of course obtaining the magic secateurs after the completion of the quest Fairy Tale Part 1, which will increase your herb yield by a little bit for each herb patch. And speaking of patches, I will also suggest preparing a route that's convenient for you to visit all of your available farming patches for you to do your farm runs every hour. Relevant to this topic, I will give you guys 2 links in the description. How to make money with farming, and a nice farming run guide I made as a part of my 1 to 99 farming guide. So grab your magic secateurs and your seeds to start leveling up and start making tons of money. At number 4, and also related to farming, I recommend getting level 45 farming as well as 60% Hosidius favor to unlock the farming guild. This will be especially useful for 2 reasons. Number 1, you will have access to farming contracts, which is another way to make money with farming, and 2, because you can access the seed vault to deposit all of your seeds to save a ton of bank space in terms of farming supplies. And come to think of it, you can also deposit tree saplings on it, which will save you even more bank space. So all around, this place is pretty crazy even for the first tier. Now, I'm pretty excited for this one because for tip number 5, we are going to mix things up and I will tell you guys to do the following. Leave your number 1 early tip in the comments below so other players players can get even more knowledge from my fellow RuneScape enthusiasts. The comment with the highest number of likes in 24 hours will win one bond, and I will reply to the winning comment asking for your RuneScape name so we can get together and I will hand over your prize. Now, some people might say this is lazy for me to leave one of these tips up to the viewers, but you guys know I love involving you in the videos, and I am someone who loves interacting with the people who take time out of their day to watch my silly little videos. So put your thinking caps on and leave your absolute most essential early game tip down below for a chance to win a juicy bond. I can't wait to read what you guys come up with. So with that nice bit of interaction out of the way, it is time for tip number 6. And it will be finishing the quest Client of Korend and unlocking all of the teleports around the continent of Zeah for easy travel, since early players might find themselves coming here very often. To unlock all of those teleports, you will also need to complete these short and fairly easy quests. The Depths of Despair for a Hostidius teleport, the Queen of Thieves for a Piscarelius teleport, the Tale of the Righteous for a Jacian teleport, the Forsaken Tower for a Lovakench teleport, and finally the Ascent of Arceus, or Arceus, I don't know how to pronounce that, for an Arceus teleport. As a nice little bonus, getting your hands on an Amulet of Jerick might also come in handy. In the spirit of keeping things Korend, tip number 7 is going to be getting favor across all 5 cities in the continent of Zeah. Now, this might not be incredibly helpful starting out, and in some cases you can't get favor pretty efficiently without your stats being slightly higher, but it will be incredibly helpful on your way towards working on some higher tier tips I will have in the future. Just remember that all 6 of the Korend quests will give you a ton of starting favor, so doing all of them will be a nice boost towards this goal, and something we can cross off our list pretty quickly and pretty early on. And now I am going to do something I have never done on the channel, and I will have my new RuneScape friend, Twisted Bow RS, give you tip number 8 for your early game goals.
What's going on, guys? I hope you guys are having an awesome Monday. I am Twisted Bow RS, and I'm here to steal Chaos's subs.
Dude, what the hell are you doing? Stick to the script and don't be cringe.
Fine. For tip number 8, we have unlocking both Fairy Rings and the Spirit Tree Network. You can do this by partially completing the quest Fairy Tale Part 2 and the Tree Gnome Village quest respectively, but to be fair, this Fairy Tale quest is fairly easy, so full completion is always suggested. Both of these transportation methods will save you a ton of time when questing or doing regular activities like herb runs and getting to more specific parts of the map a lot more quicker. And I guess the long-term goal would be to collect all the Spirit Seeds to eventually unlock all the Spirit Tree locations at higher farming levels. And now, back to you, Chaos.
Thank you, Mr. Twisted Bow RS. If you guys are interested in videos comparing different gear and weapons in OSRS, head over to his channel and give him some feedback on his recent uploads. You can find his links in the description below, and if anyone ever wants to collab with me, you can hit me up on Twitter to brainstorm content ideas together for both of our channels. So, with that out of the way, let's continue. Coming in at number 9, I have getting level 51 magic to give you access to all of these staple teleports that don't need any quests to be unlocked. Except of course for the RD teleport, which requires completion of the Plague City quest, but if you followed the first tip, this quest should already be completed. So grab your Law, Air, Fire, Water, and Earth runes and start teleporting around the map to save a ton of time when doing other activities. And finally, for tip number 10, I recommend doing the quest Bone Voyage to unlock Fossil Island, which has a ton of amazing content for all types of accounts. As an early game player, you should focus on gaining access to the Dig Site Pendant and then learning how to do birdhouse runs, which I have also covered on my channel. Basically, birdhouse runs is a way to train Hunter passively, and it takes no longer than 1 minute every hour to gain both Hunter experience and bird nests containing seeds and rings for some juicy profit. So if you do this early on, you can start gaining experience and money quicker in a passive way. So these were only 10 of my most important goals when starting out your RuneScape journey. But how do you know when you've left the early game? In my personal opinion, you will need to complete the following. You should have completed all beginner and intermediate quests, all of which can be filtered on the RuneScape wiki. You should have completed all of the easy achievement diaries to receive their respective item for a lot of nice early bonuses as well as nice experience lamps. And finally, you should expect to have at least base 50 stats, as a ton of content will be open to you once you get to this point. So get grinding and achieve these goals before you start thinking bigger, since the game can get a bit overwhelming when you make a fresh account or if you are a player who's brand new to Member World. And that's pretty much it. I hope you guys participate in today's contest, I hope you check out my friend Twisted Bow RS, and most importantly, I hope you found this video useful. Up next, we will have my top 10 mid-game goals, so I hope you guys are looking forward to that. I hope you have a great day, a great week, and I will see you in the next one. Peace!
It has been a year since I released a self-proclaimed guide called the Noob's PVM Bible, which cover all the important goals that a new player would want to know and eventually do to reach a good foundation to go bossing. And here, my friends, is the sequel, the Bossing Encyclopedia for Noobs, featuring the bossing progression ladders. This guide will be more technical because I expect you guys to have graduated from killing sand crabs and completing quests like Monkey Madness. I will try my best to convey a good idea of how to tackle your planning for the actual bossing part. This guide took a ton of time to make, just like the PVM Bible, so if you found this to be incredibly useful, please consider giving me a like, some feedback in the comments, or a subscription for future content, and lastly, maybe recommend it to a friend who might be stuck on the boss planning. If this is your second time here, this video does have timestamps, so do use the timestamps to jump to the section that you need to check. I can help narrow down your decision making by first helping you understand the general difficulty of the bosses. Doing so will help you understand why it makes sense to do them in certain orders based on variables such as what mode you play, or if you prefer safer and more chill routes versus a more intense and challenging route, or if you prefer to play solo or do things in groups mostly. And finally, if you prefer consistent money versus high risk, high reward, which are really applicable to normal accounts. Then you can pick the one that best fits you and use it as a stepping stone to make your own version of the bossing ladder and enjoy your own unique bossing journey. The first section, overview of bosses. Before we get to the bossing ladder section, I will want to spend time to go over most of the typical boss encounters currently in old school RuneScape. This should be pretty up to date for a long time. I will group the bosses in a few logical categories so that it is easier to remember them. The first group of bosses I'll cover is the beginner bosses, bosses that have pretty simple mechanics and don't require much stats or gear to do. The second group of bosses I will cover is the medium level bosses. Bosses where you need to get some decent gear and quest unlocks and learn some mechanics to do them sufficiently. The third group of bosses I'll cover is the high level bosses. The bosses where you need good gear, high level stats, meet several quest requirements and maybe other requirements, and be expected to learn some of the harder mechanics to do them sufficiently. The fourth group of bosses I will cover is the Slayer only bosses, where you have to spend time training Slayer skill to actually kill them, and they tend to be easy to moderately difficult. The fifth group of bosses will be endgame bosses that are not raids. These bosses are considered the hardest bosses in the game, where it is ideal to have high level gear and stats to do them, and typically have some of the hardest mechanics and probably the most rewarding bosses out there. The last group of bosses will also be endgame bosses, but they are in the raids category. Raids also have multiple bosses, with all of them having intricate mechanics and requirements, which makes it quite a lot more complex than just talking about one standalone boss, so they deserve their own particular section. Unfortunately, these groupings are not 100% perfect because some bosses could easily fit into multiple categories. When it comes to PVMing or bossing in RuneScape, there are nuanced variables that are used to determine how difficult a boss is. So when I cover a boss, I will describe the boss using the most popular variables and give you more context on each variable. For example, a common variable that helps describe how hard a boss is prayer flicking. So let's use Jaimo for example. Is Jaimo easy in the context of prayer flicking? Yes, it is, because you do not need to prayer flick at all, you just have to turn on pray melee. Also, I will provide a cheap recommendation setup for each boss. So the variables that I will be using to describe how difficult a boss will be is 1. Unlock difficulty. What are the additional requirements like quests, slayer levels? Number 2, gear requirement. What types of gear do you need to do this boss realistically? Number 3, stats. How high your stats needs to be and what the stats required to do the boss comfortably. Number 4, mechanics. What other mechanics to watch out for when doing the boss? Number 5, prayer flicking. how much prayer switching or prayer flicking needed to do the boss. Number 6, movement. How much precise moving or how often moving is necessary to do the boss. Number 7, equipment switching. How often do you need to switch to different styles of gear? And number 8, party play. Is the boss solo only or party required, or is it recommended to do them in groups? I will also talk about the drops of interest for each boss, as that is the core reason why you might want to try them in the first place. So there will be one extra variable, rewards, drops of interest for mains and Iron Man. Eventually, I will release a supplementary video to complement this video called something like the full fight of every Osrs boss, where you will see every boss from start to finish. It will also have some annotated tips. This will be super helpful after you've watched this guy, learn a bit about the bosses, and start planning yourself using one of the bossing ladders that's shown in this guide. So definitely check that out. There'll be a link in the description at some point. Let's talk about the first grouping of bosses, the beginner bosses. So there's 4 that I put in here: Ober, Bryophyta, Barrows Brothers, and Giant Mole. The first boss is Ober. The unlock difficulty is just getting a Giant's Key from Hell Giants. For gear, you only need 100k GP or less. You really just need like a air staff or something, and enough runes to fire Firebolt, and something like Entangle spell will be good enough. For stats, you probably want to be at least 40 magic. If you're mailing, probably at least 50 for like rune armor and a bit higher. And prayer 40 would be nice for prey range. It helps a lot. Ober has a knockback melee attack and a range attack. As for movement, it is recommended to kite the boss, because if you're far away from it, it will only range you at times, and you can pray range to reduce a lot of damage. And if you entangle or freeze it, then you can step back and just not take any damage. And the rewards are that Ober drops rune items, and it's Ober's Club, which is decent money for beginners as AUX or sold to the GE. Next is Bryophyta. The unlock difficulty is getting a Monster Key from Moss Giants to kill Bryophyta once. And for the gear, just 100k is probably good enough. For some rune armor, and maybe a rune scimitar. And for stats, you're looking at 50 melees or range. With range, magic shortbow would be ideal. 40 prayer is recommended, so you can pray mage. For mechanics, this boss does summon minions, and you do need to use secretaries to kill the minions after they are super low HP, like 1 HP. And it will also mage you, and it does poison you as well. So praying mage for prayer flicking is ideal. And for movement, there really isn't much moving. Party play, it is solo only. And as for the rewards, Bryophyta's essence is its main drop, which is used to make the nature staff, and that can be sold for millions of GP, or for Iron Man for Master Clue Scrolls. And it also drops other decent things like rune armor, which can be sold or out for decent money for beginners. Next is the Barrows Brothers. The unlock difficulty is completing Priest in Peril. Now for gear, I do recommend at least a few 100k so that you can have enough runes to use Iban's staff, and a magic shortbow with rune arrows. As for stats, you're looking at 50 range and 50 magic and at least 43 prayer. As for mechanics, there is quite a lot, but the overall mechanic that will persist the whole time is prayer draining. Whether you're fighting the boss or underground, it will drain your prayer over time. There are also puzzle doors that you'll have to solve, but they're pretty easy. And there is 1 range brother, 1 magic brother, and 4 melee brothers. Each brother has 1 unique mechanic. The most deadly is probably Darox, as if you don't pray melee and it's low HP, it could hit you for like a 60. Now, prayer flicking, you only need to put your prayer on according to the brother that you fight. And that's it. As for movement, there is not much moving when fighting the brothers, but a lot of moving underground. This boss is solo only, and for the rewards, Barrows drops lots of level 70 gear for all 3 types of combat, and they are very profitable at this level. And they also drop a ton of runes, so for Iron Man, you will get a lot of runes and really good armor as well. Next is the Giant Mole. For unlock difficulty, you technically need a spade and a light swords. And for gear, you do need probably 100 to 500k so that you can wear some decent range gear with a rune crossbow with broad bolts or better. I'd say at least 70 range for some black d'hide. Melee is okay as well if you can buy at least an abyssal dagger or better with at least base 70 melees. And for mechanics, it runs away after 100 HP and it has a melee attack. Prayer flicking, none, just pray melee. Movement, you do have to move a lot once it digs. Party play, you can do this in a group, but easily soloable. For rewards, it does drop mole pieces, which gives burst nest, so it is decent money if you do have the Faldar Art Diary done. Or for Iron Man, it's good for making brews at a later point. Now let's move on to the medium level tier of bosses. We have quite a few in here. Espori, Crazy Archaeologist, Chaos Fanatic, Scorpia, Lizardman Shaman, Skotizo, Sarachnis, King Black Dragon, Dagonoth Kings, Kelphite Queen, and Demonic Gorillas. First boss, Espori. Unlock difficulty is 65 farming and 60% Hosidius favor. You also need to get a Espori seed that you get from doing any farming activities, so you can fight it once per seed. As for the gear, you're probably looking at 100k or a bit more, or a Dragon Scimitar if meleeing, or Magic Shortbow Rune Arrows if ranging. And for the mechanics, the boss will range and use magic attack. You're looking at the Entangle that you need to spam click to free, or else you take damage. And you also have to kill flowers during 2 transition phases so that you can attack the boss. For prayer flicking, you only need to pray range. For movement, just enough to kill the flowers. For party play, it is solo only. And as for the rewards, this boss drops the Bombless Bucket, which helps a ton with farming as it doubles your compost that you put in. And it is amazing, especially for Iron Man. It also drops special seeds that helps with farming in many different ways. Next is Crazy Archaeologist. Unlock difficulty? None, but it is in the wilderness, so only bring what you're willing to risk. For gear, even 100k will do it. Just need an Ivan staff. For stats, 50 magic and 40 prayer for prayer range is good enough. For mechanics, you just have to dodge the exploding books when it shouts Ring of Knowledge. It does have a range attack. For prayer flicking, just keep your range prayer up. For movement, just enough to dodge the books. For party play, it can be done with groups, but usually just soloed. For rewards, Malediction and Odium shards to make those shields, which are decent money, and Rune Crossbow, which is great to get for early Iron Man. Next is Chaos Fanatic. Same as Crazy Archaeologist, no unlock difficulty, just be prepared to go to the wilderness. For gear, just 100k is good enough for the Rune Crossbow. I recommend 70 range for Black d'hide and 37 prayer for Prey Mage. Mechanics are just dodge the Magical Floor Explosion and the de-equip magic attack alongside a normal magic attack. For prayer flicking, you just need a Prey Mage. For movement, you just need to move to dodge the green explosion attack. Party play, usually soloed. For rewards, it's the Malediction and Odium shards. And next is Scorpia, part of the trio Demi Waldi bosses, the last one. Unlock difficulty, prepare to go to wilderness. Gear, you're looking at 500k to 2 mil because of the Trident of the Seas and maybe an occult necklace. For stats, 75 magic for the Trident. As for mechanics, you do want Ice Burst to freeze the healers when below 100 HP, and you do need to lure Scorpia away from them. The minions will constantly attack you with range, and you will get poisoned. And for prayer flicking, keep prey range on. Movement, you do need to kite this boss and lure the boss away from the minions. Party play, you can solo it, but bringing a few friends can help a lot, as it is very high level Waldi. And for the rewards, the Malediction and Odium Shard components. Next is Lizardmen Shamans. You do need 100% Shazian favor to do this boss. And for gear, you're looking at 300k to 5 mil. Magic Shortbow is bare minimum, but I recommend a Blowpipe, actually. For stats, you're looking at 61 range for the RCB or 75 for the Blowpipe. And for mechanics, you do need to dodge the minions that do explode. And you also need to watch out for the jump attack if you are not next to a wall. And it will range you and use a melee attack if nearby. Prayer flicking, just pray range. For movement, you do need to dodge the minions and the jump attack. Party play, it is almost always soloed, but there is an area that you can do groups. As for rewards, Dragon Warhammer, which is very valuable and tons of alcohols. It is decent overall money, and Iron Man will want to grind this guy for the Dragon Warhammer for long-term bossing. Next is Skoltizo. You have to do a lot of Slayer at the Catacombs for the totem pieces to make a full totem to access this boss once per totem. As for gear, you're looking at 500k to 1 mil. You definitely want an Art Light, as that is technically free and one of the best weapons there. At least Black D-High for top and bottom, and decent melee gear for every other piece. And stats, I definitely recommend 75 attack and strength with 43 prayer. And mechanics are, there are eye towers that spawn sometimes, which will boost his defense, so kill them with the Art Light, and it will spawn minions. It has a magic and melee attack, with inconsistent attack speed. For prayer flicking, you do want to pray melee when it's up close, and pray mage when you are far away from it, killing the eyes. Movement, you do need to run a lot to kill the eyes. Party play, solo only, and for rewards, it drops ancient shards to power your Art Light, and really good overall drops in clue scrolls. Next is Sorachnus. There is no unlock difficulty, but having access to Hosidius House Telly would be nice to get there. As for gear, you're probably looking at least 1 mil to 5 mil. At least a cudgel and good armor like Carol's, and some melee gear outside of the top and bottom. Stats, you're looking at 70 attack and strength and defense with 43 prayer. Mechanics, this boss will range you when you're far away, and it will melee you when you're close, and it will summon melee and mage minions at 66 and 33% health. Prayer flicking, you do need to pray accordingly. And for movement, you do need to move around, as it will move a lot. Party play, usually solo, but can bring friends. Rewards, Sorachnus Cudgel, and decent overall drops. Next is King Black Dragon. There is no unlock difficulty, but you do have to run through the wilderness, so don't bring stuff you don't want to risk. As for gear, a range setup of a few 100k will work with rune crossbow and diamond bolts, and some D-hide, or several mil if you are meleeing with a Hasta. As for stats, 80 range will be great, or 80 melees if you're meleeing. King Black Dragon has several attacks, a basic melee attack, a basic fire breath attack, and various typeless fire breath attacks that can freeze you, poison you, or lower your stats. So definitely bring anti-poison and good old anti-fire breath with an anti-fire shield or a better version. As for prayer flicking, you just need pray melee, and there is really no movement, and it is soloable, but you can bring friends. For rewards, it drops Draconic Visage and Dragon Pickaxe with decent overall drops. It is a very good way to get a D pick for Iron Man that wants to avoid constant wildly activity. Next is Dagonoth Kings. Unlock difficulty none, but I recommend finishing Freemic Trials quests. For gear, I recommend at least 10 to 20 mil for a trident, a whip, and a blowpipe, assuming you're doing all three. Good melee gear is a must, like at least barrels top and bottom. For stats, you're looking at 80 attack and strength with 70 defense, 75 magic, 75 range, 43 prayer, but if you're killing Rex only, then you just need at least 50 magic and 43 prayer. For mechanics, Supreme uses range attack, Prime uses magic attack, and Rex melees. Keep in mind, knowing safe spots is super important, especially for Rex and Prime. And also, there'll be Spinal Lip minions that will attack you frequently. They are all based on your range defense, so higher range will help a lot with blocking their damage. Spinal Lips will also poison and occasionally drain your prayer, but the higher your range defense, the less likely either will happen. For prayer flicking, you just have to make sure that you are praying according to the boss you're fighting, but if both spawns, then being able to switch between prayers would be really, really ideal, but not recommended for beginners. As for movement, you do have to move between the bosses if you're killing all three. And for equip switching, if you are killing all three, you will need to switch between quite a bit of different gear, but mostly just weapons and your top and bottom probably. For party play, it is soloable, but can be grouped. And rewards are Berserker Ring, Archer's Ring, Seer's Ring, Word's Ring, Dragon Axe, and a few others. Is extra good money if you do have the Elite Diary done for the noted Dagonoth bones. And the uniques are really good for Iron Man, especially early on. Next is Calfight Queen. Unlock difficulty is none, but I recommend finishing beneath Cursed Sands for the very powerful and cheap Karis Partisan. For gear, it's probably going to be at least 10 to 20 mil. If you don't have the Partisan, you'll probably need a Bludgeon or a Zarmakian Hasta, and you'll also need a Blowpipe. And for stats, I recommend 80 plus melees, 80 plus range, and at least 70 prayer for piety. For mechanics, the boss has a 100% hit rate on magic and range if you are not praying according to its attack. And it also has two phases. The first phase is weak to melee, and the second phase is weak to range. I recommend going under the boss when you are eating to save damage. For prayer flicking, you just need to keep either mage or range on. It does not matter. One is all you need. For equip switching, you will have to switch between melee gear and range gear. For party play, either is fine. For rewards, D-Chain, Dragon Two-Hander, Cufflight Queen Head, and eventually a D-Pickaxe. That will also be an update for this boss. Good overall drops, and KQ Head is needed for the Desert Elite Diary. Iron Man may kill this boss for Dragon Pickaxe and D-Chain for clue steps additionally. Next is Demonic Gorillas. Unlock difficulty is Monkey Madness 2 Grandmaster Quest. For gear, I recommend at least 10 to 20 mil for a blowpipe and an art light, which is free. If no art light, then whip. For armor, at least Black D high or better with melee accessories. For stats, at least 80 range and 80 melees with 43 prayer. For mechanics, you want to dodge the falling boulders, and after you do 50 damage, it will resist you with the correct prayer, and it uses all three attack styles. For prayer flicking, you will have to do quite a lot, as they will change attacks after 3 consecutive zeros done on you. For movement, you just need to dodge the boulders, and this can be done in groups, but it is usually solo. There is a multi-area for groups. For rewards, the biggest one is Zenith Shards and the lesser lackluster Ballista Pieces. The overall drops are really good. This boss is very profitable, and for Ironmans, you will want to kill them for the Zenith Shards for best in slot jewelry at some point. The next section of bosses is the high level bosses. Commander Zeliana, General Grador, Kirill Susaroth, Kriara, Chaos Elemental, Venenatus, Callisto, Vedion, Toxtalk Jad, aka Fight Caves, Zora, Vorkath, and Corporeal Beast. So the first boss in this list is Commander Zeliana. The unlock difficulty is 70 agility. For the gear, we're looking at 10 to 20 mil for at least ideally a dragon crossbow with dragon diamond bolts, and also with the blowpipe / serp helm assist, and with good range gear. For stats, we're looking at 80 plus range and 75 plus defense. For mechanics, there are 3 minions with 3 different attack styles, and the boss has a very accurate magic and melee attack if you fight her up close. For prayer flicking, you do not need to prayer flick at all. You can just pray mage. As for movement, you will have to move around a lot to avoid her attacks, so you will run around the room in a circle while kiting her. As for equip switching, there usually isn't much, but at the beginning, I do recommend blowpipe with the serp helm so you can tag the minions and keep them poisoned, and then switch back to your crossbow to kill the boss or your best range weapon. Party play, you can either solo or group. And as for rewards, Ceridum and Hilt, Armadale Crossbow, God Sword Shards. It's good money when drops happen, otherwise it's mediocre. And for Iron Man, you will eventually want all of these items. Next is General Grador. Unlock difficulty is 70 strength. As for gear, we're looking at 20 to 30 mil, so you can get yourself at least a Bandos God Sword spec weapon with at least a whip and good melee armor, or RCB or better crossbow with good range gear if you're ranging. Now for stats, you're looking at 80 plus melees or range of doing a range kiting strategy. And for mechanics, there are 3 minions with 3 different attack styles, and the boss has a very powerful melee and a pretty strong range attack. I do recommend learning to stall under the boss when you're eating, or just to learn how to slow down his attacks, and kiting the boss if you are ranging. Now for prayer flicking, you do not need to at all. Just pray melee during the boss, and when the minions are up, just pray mage or range. And for movement, a lot if ranging Bandos, otherwise not much. And for equip switching, you do not need to switch at all, but I do recommend bringing some mage gear to blood burst or barrage the minions for heals after the boss dies, so you will need to switch into some mage gear. Now for party play, either is fine. As for the rewards, it drops Bandos Hilt, Bandos Chestplate, Bandos Tassets, Bandos Boots, and Godsword Shards. Good money when the drops happen, otherwise mediocre. Iron Man will eventually want these items. Bandos Boot is a clue item. Next is Kirill Susaroth. Unlock difficulty, 70 hit points. For gear, you're looking at 20 to 30 mil for the Bandos Godsword special attack weapon and an Art Light, which is basically free. Or RCB or better if you're doing a range method. Stats, 80 plus melees, or range if you're doing the range cutting strategy. And mechanics, 3 minions with 3 different attack styles, and the boss has a powerful melee and powerful magic attack. And be wary of his additional melee attack that can drain prayer if tanking would pray melee on. Good to dance the boss if doing melee, go under the boss every 2 hits. Prayer flicking is not needed, just keep pray melee up and pray mage when fighting minions. Now movement, you will be moving a lot if you are ranging, otherwise not much. Equip switching, none unless you are bringing some magic gear to blood burst and barrage the minions. Party play either is fine. As for rewards, it drops Zamrakian Hilt, Zamrakian Spear, Staff of the Dead, Katsu Shards, good money when the drops happen, otherwise mediocre. Iron Man will eventually want all of these items, especially 2 Zamrakian Spears. Next is Kriara. Unlock difficulty, 70 range. Gear, looking at 20 to 30 mil, so that you can buy a ton of chins, or at least a dragon crossbow or better, and good range gear. Stats, 80 plus defense, 80 plus range, 80 plus magic. Mechanics, 3 minions with 3 different attack styles, and the boss has a powerful range and a magic attack. Prayer flicking is not needed, so just pray range basically the whole time. As for movement, not much for beginners. Equip switching, a bit if you are bringing some magic gear for barraging the minions to heal. Party play either is fine, but bring a friend helps a ton if not iron. Pre-aura is especially a bit harder than the other 3 God Wars bosses. As for rewards, it drops the Armadillo Hilt, the Armadillo chest plate, the chain skirt, and the helmet, and Godsword Shards. Great money when the drops happen. Iron Man will eventually want all these items, especially the armor. The helmet is a clue item. Next is Chaos Elemental. There is no unlock difficulty, but it is in the wilderness, at very high level wilderness, so be careful with risks. As for gear, you probably want at least 10 mil for a strong, hard-hitting weapon like a Zamrakian Godsword or Vigorous Mace. Stats, 80 plus melees. Its mechanics are the ability to teleport you with one of its attacks. One of its other attacks will de-equip your items if you have open inventory space, so I do recommend something like Summer Pies or Brews. For prayer flicking, you do not need to prayer flick, you just need to pray mage if it's able to attack you. Movement, you will move a bit. People usually flinch this boss behind a tree or a safe spot if you don't have a good ranged weapon like a T-bow. Equip switching, not much at all, unless you are getting de-equipped a lot. Party play either is fine, it's usually solo though. Rewards, it drops Dragon Pickaxe, a Dragon 2-handed. For Iron Man, it is one of the more chill options to get a Dragon Pickaxe. Next is Venenatis pre-update. It will be getting updated soon, so this may not exactly be correct. Unlock difficulty is in the wilderness. For gear, you're looking at 1 to 5 mil. I really do recommend Magic Shortbow with the cannon strategy. If you don't do that, then at least bring full Verax to tank and melee this boss. As for stats, 80 plus range or 80 plus melees if you are using melee. This boss has a few type of attacks. It has a basic magic attack, and it also has a typeless attack that just does a lot of damage, and it also can drain your prayer and poison you. It's usually safe spot though, so you can negate most of it. Prayer flicking is not needed, but you do want to pray mage at all times. As for movement, you just need to move enough to set up the safe spot. There really isn't any equip switching. Party play, it is kind of difficult to do this boss as a group, but possible. I don't recommend it. As for rewards, it does drop Giant Pickaxe and Treasus Ring, and good drops overall. One of the options for Iron Man to get a D-pick. Next is Callisto pre-update. Again, it's getting updated soon, so this information may not be accurate. Unlock difficulty, Wilderness. As for gear, I recommend 10 to 20 mil so you can get yourself a Vigorous Mace. If not, you want to use Whip or Volverax. Stats 80 plus melees. Mechanics, typeless knockback, damage, attack. It has a melee attack as well. All of it can be avoided through proper safe spotting. Don't really need to prayer flake, but do keep pray melee on, especially when you're learning. Movement, enough to set up a safe spot. Not much equip switching. Party play, either is fine. Rewards, it drops Strand Pickaxe, Tyrannical Ring, and good drops overall. Tyrannical Ring is good for Dragon Warhammer specking Corp, but not super important. Next is Vedion pre-update. Things may be slightly out of date soon. Unlock difficulty, Wilderness, Gear, looking at 10 to 20 mil for Vigorous Mace. If not, get a Hosta or a Bludgeon or a Giant Mace. And Salve Amulet E, because it's really free. Stats 80 plus melees. Mechanics, it does have an area attack that is a typeless Quake attack if you're near it. Also a normal melee attack and an electricity area attack that you can move away from. Usually safe spotted though. Prayer flicking is not needed, but I do recommend praying melee when you are setting up the safe spot. Movement, enough to set up the safe spot. Equip switching, there is none. Party play, soloing is recommended. Rewards, Dragon Pickaxe, Ring of the Gods, and good overall drops. Ring of the Gods is nice to get on an Iron Man, but not super important. Next is Jad. Unlock difficulty, none, but you do need some balls of steel mentality. One of the first true bosses that might make your palms sweaty, arms heavy. Now for gear, you're looking at least 10 mil or more, or at least a blowpipe, and some decent range gear, like God D'hide. Stats, you want at least 80 range and 70 defense. And mechanics, it is a wave system challenge that spans 63 waves, each wave typically becoming harder until the very end, which is Jad. As for the waves, when the Ranger starts showing up and thus beginning the Ranger waves, you do want to pray range, and when the major waves start showing up, you will now switch over to prioritizing pray mage. But when the majors are dead, you can then worry about praying range as a secondary. Also, you have to attack the healers to prevent them from healing Jad at half HP. Jad has 3 attack styles. You only have to worry about really the range and melee one, because melee won't touch you unless you're next to it. But both of those attacks can hit, I believe, at least a 98. So make sure you prayer flick correctly. Until Jad, of course. Then you have to follow the Jad's attacks. As for prayer flicking, you do need to watch out for Jad's feet stomp, which is pray range, and Jad's feet held up, which is pray mage. Movement. Moving is super necessary to trap or kill the minions throughout the waves. Party play. It is solo only. Equip switching, not needed typically. And the reward is the fire cape. It is the second best melee cape in the game. Next is Zora. You do need to complete Regicide quests. And I recommend 76 agility for the fairy ring, so it's a cheap way to get there. As for gear, you're looking at 10 to 20 mil for a trident, a toxic version, blowpipe, good range, and magic gear. For stats, you're looking at 80 magic and range. Mechanics, Zora has 3 styles of auto attacks, 1 range and 1 magic, and a melee attack that is avoidable. Memorize the 4 Zora rotations, melee magic snakelings as minions that will spawn throughout the different rotations. It also has a jab phase, which will alternate between range and magic for a while, or magic and range, depending on the rotation. And also 3 different attack forms, representing the 3 different attack styles. Green and red form is weak to magic, and blue form is weak to range. For prayer flicking, you do need to actually flick your prayers a bit, not just keep one prayer up. For the jab phase especially, you do need to alternate between pray, mage, and range correctly. And also, every time Zora dives, it will switch to a different form, so you need to be ready to pray switch correctly. Zora will also inflict a super high level version of poison, which you will either want anti-venom, a serpelm, or a lot of anti-poison or cure me spell. Equip switching, you will be constantly switching between magic and range gear a lot throughout the fight. Party play, it is solo only. Rewards is Magic Fang, Tanzanite Fang, Serpelm, Onyx, and good overall drops. This boss is very profitable once consistent for mains, and for Iron Man, these items are super important. Iron Man will also need lots of Zora skills from her to power up their Zora items. Next is Vorkath. Unlock difficulty, Dragon Slayer 2 Grandmaster Quest. As for gear, you're looking at 20 to 30 mil for a Bandos Godsword with at least a Hasta and decent melee armor. Or if you're ranging, cheap range options are available with at least Rune Crossbow up, but it is really bad compared to melee as far as cheap setups go, so I don't recommend it. And stats, 80 plus melees and 39 magic for Crumble Undead. As for mechanics, Vorkath has the rapid fire breath attack with poison on the ground, so you must dodge poison and dodge fire breath at the same time. It also has a freeze attack with a homing exploding zombie minion that you must kill with Crumble Undead. It also has a giant flying fireball that will descend from the sky, which you must dodge. It has 3 auto styles of attacks. It has a fire breath attack that can poison you, a fire breath attack that can take off your prayer. For prayer flicking, you don't really need to prayer flick, but you do need to pray accordingly. If you're meleeing, you definitely want to pray mage. If you're ranging, you most likely will be praying range. As for movement, you do need to move a lot to avoid the fire spam attack. Equip switching, there really isn't any. Party play, it is solo only, and for rewards, it does drop the Vorkath's head to make the Avas Assembler the best range cape in the entire game, and Skeletal Visage to make a pretty powerful range shield that reduces fire breath damage. Vorkath's head is guaranteed a 50 kill count, so it is very worth getting on an Iron Man early, or any account. Next is Corporeal Beast. Unlock difficulty, there is none. You just need a games necklace. As for gear, we're probably looking at least 50 mil or more for a Dragon Warhammer, a Bandos Godsword, and a Samarakan Spear, and good melee accessories. For stats, we're looking at 85 plus melees, and high magic is recommended. Mechanics, there is a core that spawns, and it will eat your HP and give it back to the boss, but you can dodge it, or you can flinch kill it and stop it from spawning. It has 3 magic attacks. One of them can drain your prayer and stats, and the other one can splash and hit you multiple times. Most people prefer to cheese the boss by speccing down its stats to 0, so you can kind of just AFK the boss. As for prayer flicking, you just need to pray magic. As for movement, you do need to move enough to manage the core properly. There really isn't any equip switching for basic core methods. Party play either is fine. As for rewards, it drops Elysian Sigil, Arcane Sigil, Spectral Sigil, Holy Elixir, and other good drops overall. This boss is good profit when a big drop happens, otherwise it is small profit. These shields are technically best in slot, but none of them are so important that you must get it ASAP, so for Iron Man, it is up to you to decide on that. Next session is the Slayer only bosses. These are bosses that can only be done through Slayer tasks and having the right level. They are Grotesque Guardians, Abyssal Sire, Kraken, Cerberus, Smoke Devil, and the Hydra. Now, let's begin with Grotesque Guardians. Unlock difficulty is 75 Slayer, Priest Imperial Quest, and the Brittle Key from No More Gargoyles. For gear, I am going to recommend 10 to 20 million for at least a blowpipe and a whip with decent range and melee gear. As for stats, I would say 80 range and melee stats. As for the mechanics, there are 2 bosses, but you can only attack one of them at a time, so you must fight Dawn first, the ranger, and then Dusk, the meleeer. Dawn on the first phase can freeze you with an ice attack, and on the second phase, it can do that on top of shooting out the heal orbs, in which you must grab it or it will heal the boss, or you have to try to DPS it. And for Dusk, it has the knockback charge attack, which you must avoid. It also has falling debris, which you must avoid. It also has the flame pit attack on the last phase, which you must escape from. And they have the synergy lightning attack that happens between each phase, so you have to dodge them. And falling debris. For prayer flicking, you don't really need to prayer flick, but you do want to at least pray range on the last phase. And the previous phases, you may need to pray melee or just dance the boss. For movement, you just need to move enough to dodge the mechanics. As for equip switching, you will definitely have to switch between range and melee gear every time they sub out. As for rewards, it drops the Tourmaline Core, the Granite Hammer, and decent overall drops, so it is decent overall profit. For Iron Man, this boss is pretty optional. Next is Abyssal Sire. Unlock difficulty is 85 Slayer, and the access to the fairy rings is recommended. For gear, we're looking at least 20 mil. You will want at least Art Light, which is free, with Crystal Bowl or Blowpipe, and good melee armor. Now for stats, you're looking at 80 plus melees and range, and 88 magic for Shadow Barrage. For mechanics, first phase you must put the boss to sleep using a shadow spell and then kill the vents. After that, you have to watch out for the poison floor that will happen from time to time, and there will be minions that spawn throughout the fight that will range most likely and melee occasionally. There's also the explosion attack on phase 3 that you have to watch out for. And for prayer flicking, you do want to pray melee on part 2, and on part 3 you want to pray range. And for movement, you do have to move a bit so that you can dodge the poison. For equip switching, you will need to switch from ideally range gear to melee gear after P1 is done. As for rewards, this boss drops Abyssal Bludgeon pieces, the Abyssal Dagger, Abyssal Whip. It is decent, consistent profit overall. For Iron Man, it might be worth getting these items as they are moderately useful, especially if you get lucky. However, there are plenty of similar weapons from other bosses that you can get. Next is Kraken. This boss requires 87 Slayer. For gear, 5 to 10 mil should suffice for a trident and an occult necklace, some D-hide or carols. Now for stats, at least 75 magic. Mechanics, you just need to wake up the boss by attacking the 4 tentacles and kill the boss. It is incredibly simple. Prayer flicking, there really isn't any prayer protection needed, but you can put preserve on if you're using Imbue Heart. No moving, no equip switching. As for rewards, it does drop full Triumph of the Seas, the Kraken Tentacle, and it is good consistent profit. But for Iron Man, this boss is fairly optional, as the Trident, which is a really important item for Iron Man, can easily be gone off the normal mob version. Next is Cerberus. You need 91 Slayer to unlock this boss. For gear, I recommend somewhere between 10 to 20 mil. You definitely want Arc Light for this, as it is very cheap. If not, get a Zamrakian Hosta or a Bludgeon. And good melee gear. There's also range alternative as well with the Blowpipe, but I think melee is a lot more chill. As for stats, I would say 80 plus melees, or 80 plus range if you're ranging. For the mechanics, this boss does have 3 style auto attacks. It also has a special attack that will use all 3 styles consecutively. Once the boss goes under 400 HP, it can spawn 3 ghosts with 3 different attack styles, and you have to prayer flick against them, or else you will lose 30 HP per prayer flick that you miss, and you will also lose 30 prayer no matter what per ghost. And also, it will shoot lava floor attacks when it is under 200 HP, so you do have to move away from them. And for movement, you just need to move to dodge the lava floor attack. No equip switching is really needed. As for rewards, this boss drops the Primordial Crystal, the Eternal Crystal, and the Purgation Crystal, and Smoldering Stone. As for money potential, it is good profit in the long run, especially when you get something like a Primordial. As for Iron Man, you want all these crystals as they are major upgrades for best in slot boots. Next is Smoke Devil. This boss requires 93 Slayer. For gear, I recommend 10 to 20 mil for at least a whip and full carols, and the rest melee accessories. As for stats, you're looking at 90 plus melees, you'll probably have it by this point, and high magic. As for mechanics, it does a typeless magic based rapid attack, and you can slow it down by going under the boss when you are on cooldown with your weapon and reduce a lot of damage. You don't need a prayer flake, but some people do use redemption method with prayer pots. As for movement, you will move a bit if you are dancing the boss. There really isn't any equip switching. As for rewards, it drops Occult Necklace, Smoke Battle Staff, and decent profit regardless if you get the big drops or not, but good profit if you do. And for Iron Man, the necklace is a major upgrade. Finally, there is the Hydra boss, requiring 95 Slayer. This boss, I would say, requires at least 10 to 20 mil for at least a blowpipe and decent range gear. As for stats, you're gonna definitely want 90 plus range. there is quite a few mechanics. Most of it involves luring the boss to different parts of the map to the correct vents. The first phase will lure the boss to the red vents and it will spray poison on the ground. Next phase, you'll lure to the green vents at 75%, which the boss can summon electricity in which you have to dodge. And third phase is the blue vent at 50% HP, which it can shoot flame walls in which you do have to dodge or just stop it from moving. At the very end is the last phase at 25%. It will shoot alternating range and magic attack with the occasional poison spray, and it will hit really hard. And throughout the entire fight, it will alternate its magic and range attacks. 3 hits for the first few phases, and last phase is every hit. As for prayer flicking, you will have to constantly switch prayers to block its alternating attacks. And for movement, you do need to move quite a bit to lure the boss and dodge some of those specials. There really isn't any equip switching. As for rewards, it drops the Hydra's Claw, the Hydra Leather, the Brimstone Ring pieces, and it is great consistent profit regardless if you get the big drops or not. Hydra Claw and Leather are massive Iron Man upgrades, and the Brimstone Ring is not too bad either. And to the next section, the end game bosses that are not raids. We have the following: Corrupted Gauntlet, Folsani's Nightmare, including normal Nightmare, Nex, and the Inferno. Let's go to Corrupted Gauntlet. The unlocked difficulty for this boss is Song of the Elves Grand Master Quest. As for gear, you don't need anything because it's a minigame encounter and the gear is provided within. Now for stats, you're looking at least 85 plus melees with either 85 plus magic or 85 plus range, or 85 plus magic and range with lower melees, but honestly 85 plus all three would be nice. As for mechanics, there is a lot, so I won't be able to go too into detail on all of them. That's probably where you should definitely look up a guide for that, but I will explain the core ones. You must prepare from scratch the gear and supplies to fight the Hunlif within the minigame. In order to make the best weapons for the Hunlif fight, you need to kill the demi-bosses, which will drop the tier 3 weapon upgrades. And the demi-bosses spawn on the edge of each side in the middle 3 rooms. And for boss itself, it has dangerous floor tiles that will move around periodically, so you have to stay away from those. And the boss can summon heat-seeking tornadoes. Initially, there's only 2, but it will progressively get into 3 or 4 as the fight goes on. And the boss has alternating magic and range attacks. It will switch every 4 hits at the start arrow range. The boss also has a special attack that can disable your prayer, and if you run under the boss, there's a chance it will stop you. And the boss also has prayers on, so when you do hit the boss 5 times with a attack style that it is not blocking, it will switch prayers to block that attack, and you will need to switch your weapons. As for prayer flicking, there is a decent amount of prayer flicking in terms of just making sure you turn on the prayer when it's disabled, and you also switch the prayers when the boss switches attacks. Now for movement, there is a ton of moving. You'll constantly have to move to dodge the heat-seeking tornadoes and the dangerous moving tiles. As for equip switching, you do need to switch between the 2 weapons that you'll fight the boss with. As for party play, you can only solo this boss. And for rewards, it drops Enhanced Weapon Seed and the Crystal Armor Seeds. It is one of the most consistent moneymakers out there that is also just very profitable. The seeds are important upgrades for Iron Man. Iron Man ideally wants 1 Enhanced Weapon Seed for a Fardinen bow and 6 Crystal Armor Seeds for the full Crystal Armor set. Next is Folsani's Nightmare. The unlocked difficulty is Priest in Peril Quest, but I do recommend getting the Dragon's Medallion. And for gear, you're looking at 50 to 100 mil, because you're gonna need quite a lot of good gear. At least a bludgeon, at least a trident, and really good melee gear like bandos, and good mage gear like Tormented Bracelet. As for mechanics, there are far too many, so I won't be able to cover all of them. I do recommend watching a guide for sure. Now, I will talk about the notable ones, of course. The most common mechanic that you'll see throughout the fight is the shadow hand pulls that she will dig on the ground and you have to dodge the shadow that shows up. And she will summon the sleepy mushrooms, which you cannot touch, or else it will drain your run and it'll force you to attack really slow and you can only walk for a while, which is really bad because she will combo that with the shadow hand pulls. It also has all 3 auto attack styles, so you must constantly be ready to pray accordingly. It will also spawn Husk minions that are ranged in melee, so you have to kill them or else you cannot move and it'll do damage to you. It has a parasite attack. Occasionally she will swap your prayers, meaning if you pray range, for example, it's actually pray melee, so you have to learn to adapt. There's the Fly Infested Quadrant special where you must find the safe quadrant so you don't get hit constantly for like 20s. And during each of the phase when it ends, you must charge the 4 pillars 4 times, as there are 4 phases for that, to break his shield, and then ultimately the final phase you will have to kill it. After each pillar phase, there will be sleepwalkers that will run towards the boss. You have to kill them before they reach the boss, or you can take up to over 100 plus damage. And also you have to dodge the shadow pulls while the sleepwalkers make it to the boss to heal it. As for movement, you will need to move a lot so that you can charge up the pillars and dodge as many different attacks like the mushrooms and the dash. As for equip switching, you will need to switch between melee and magic gear. Melee for when you're fighting the boss and magic gear when you're charging the pillars. As for party play, the Fulsani is solo only. The normal can be done in groups, but Fulsani is typically a much more rewarding boss. As for the rewards, it drops the full Inquisitor armor, top, bottom, the helmet, the Inquisitor mace, the Nightmare Orbs, the Eldritch Harmony and Volatile, and the Nightmare Staff. It is good money when the big drops happen. Although for Iron Man, this grind is fairly optional. Although these items are all best in slot, they are not super important. The next boss is the 5th God Wars boss, Nex. Unlock difficulty 70 HP, 70 strength, 70 range, and 70 agility, as you have to kill all 4 original God Wars bosses for the key pieces. As for gear, we're probably looking at least to 100 to 200 mil, because I highly recommend the Osmunten's Fang and an Armadillo crossbow with some decent range hybrid gear, such as Karos. As for stats, you definitely want 90 plus melees and range, and high magic is super useful. There are many mechanics, so again, I recommend you watch a guide for thorough information, but there are 5 stages to this fight with different mechanics, and each stage has a different minion except for the last phase. Now, the first phase is the smoke phase, the second phase is the shadow phase, third phase is blood phase, fourth phase is ice phase, and last phase is Zoros phase. Some notable mechanics include the cough mechanic on phase 1, which will lower your stats and it will spread to other people, so you have to stay away from other people. First phase also has the dash attack, and the boss can also pull you next to her. Next is the shadow phase. It will summon shadow holes on the ground, which you must avoid, and it will also cast darkness. When this happens, you cannot be next to the boss, or else you will be dealt with constant 20s, so you must avoid it at all costs. Third phase, there is the blood reverse that you have to kill, or else he'll heal from the boss. Then there's blood sacrifice, which you must run away from the boss when it inflicts on you, or else he'll heal a lot and you'll take a lot of damage. Fourth phase has the ice prison, in which your teammates must break you from the ice prison or take massive damage. There's also the ice containment attack that will surround the boss, so you must dodge it when she says contain this. And the last phase is the infamous soul split, which the boss will drain your prayer and heal off of you, and it can also pray melee, so you must switch between melee and range during this phase. And for prayer flicking, you do want to pray mage for most of the fights except for the shadow phase, in which you must pray range. On the final phase, you want to pray mage if you are not tanking, and pray melee if you are, or else you'll take a lot of damage. As for movement, there is a ton of moving around throughout the entire fight. You must dodge mechanics, and you must chase the boss because it does move around a ton. Throughout the fight, you will be switching a lot between range and melee, whether it's minion to boss or just when the boss moves around or switches prayer. But if you're ranging only, then no switching. For party play, only realistically done in groups, guys. Souls are practically impossible. Popular French chat though for people getting into next is Osrs next FFA and the Kodai. But the Kodai is for people with max gear and they only split. And rewards. Lots of good stuff. Nahil Horn, full Torva, top, bottom, helmet, the Ancient Hill to make the Zara's Godsword, some right Van Braces, best range gloves in the game. Great money when drops happen, especially if splitting. But if you're doing free-for-all, it could take a while to get a big drop. Full Torva and Zara Van Braces are pretty big upgrades for endgame irons. And the other drops are also pretty good, but not as important. And finally, we have the Inferno. The unlocked difficulty requires sacrificing a fire cape. And this boss requires a ton of patience and a lot of bravery. As for gear, you're looking at 200 mil plus for full crystal with the bowl of Ferdinand and some magic gear. As for stats, I really do recommend 99 range and 99 magic. As for mechanics, there's way too much. You definitely need a guide for this, but I'll explain some of the basics. This boss is similar to fight caves where there is a wave system, where it will get increasingly harder until Zuck at wave 69. There are various minions with special abilities. The most notable minions are the Jiao Ak that checks your prayer and will attack you accordingly and spawns minions after death. And each minion has a different attack style. The Jiao M Coat is the melee guy that will chase you even if you block it. If you don't kill it on time, it will dig to you. Jiao Zek that spawns previously killed minions, and it is the major minion. And there is a Jad Wave, and followed by a triple Jad Wave, where you will have to fight 3 Jads at once. So you must be able to block all of their attacks. And lastly, the Suck Wave summons minions periodically up to Jad, and this phase also has healers involved. You must follow the shield, or else you will have an incredibly high chance of dying, as the boss's max hit is easily over 100. Now for prayer flicking, you do have to learn a lot of prayer flicking. Some advanced prayer flicking strategies for the Inferno is highly recommended. You're gonna have to do more than just simply switching your prayers. You have to ideally learn how to time your prayers or certain methods. And for movement, you will have to move a lot. You have to move to trap monsters behind pillars, and you also need to move a lot in general as Zuck. For equip switching, you just need mage gear at the start of each wave to clear the nibblers, and then put on your range gear for the rest of the fights. As for rewards, there's simply Talk Cool and of course the Inferno Cape, which is the best melee cape in the entire game, so it is worth getting in the long run. Now we are reaching the last category of bosses, the end game bosses that are raids. There are 3 raids. The first one is Chambers of Xerix. The second one is Theater of Blood, and the last one so far to this day is the Tombs of Amusket. As for Chambers of Xerix, the unlocked difficulty is none, but I do recommend getting the Xerix Talisman in the long run, as you will need a nice way to get there. As for gear, I highly recommend at least 100 mil or more. You want a whip, ideally a lance, with either Vandal's Godsword or Giant Warhammer. At least a blowpipe rune crossbow combo, ideally at least a full crystal armor set with the F-bow, and Toxic Trident with full void with all 3 helmets, or full tribrid setup with something like Bandos, Arams, and Gaudy Hide. Now, for stats, I recommend 90 plus all combat stats. And for mechanics, there are far too many, so definitely resort to looking at a more in-depth guide. I will go over the basics though. Each raid encounter in Chambers is very different, except for the final boss. Ohm will always be the same. Usually it is 1 to 2 skilling rooms and 3 to 5 mini bosses. And Ohm of course is at the very end. There are many demi-bosses that you will encounter in Chambers, such as Ice Demon, Lizardman Shaman, Skeletal Mystics, Guardians, Vespula, Tecton, Fasa Nesterio, Vanguards, and Mudadiles. There are also a bunch of different puzzle rooms like the Crab Room and the Thieving Room. The Ohm has multiple phases. Everything will scale based on how many people in the raid. Each boss and each puzzle room has its own various mechanics. Ohm has a ton of mechanics. Again, there's no way I can properly explain chambers to you in this guide, so you definitely need to check out a guide. Now for prayer flicking, you will have to do a ton of that, especially at Ulm. As for movement, you will be moving a ton throughout the entire raid for every single room. As for equip switching, you will need to switch between 3 different styles of gear throughout the entire raid. And for party play, it is typically recommended to start learn chambers as a group, because trying to learn chambers solo for a novice, it's not practical. Now I do recommend Redo Raids Discord. I will put the link in the description, and this Discord is really good for finding teachers to teach you and people to raid with. As for rewards, Chambers drops the Fable Twisted Bow, the Coda Insignia, the Elder Maul, Ancestral Robes, which consists of the top, bottom, and the hat, Dragon Claws, Dragon Hunter Crossbow, Augury, and the Dexterous Prayer Scroll, Twisted Buckler, and Din's Bulwark. It is great money when the drops happens, otherwise it is okay money. Most of these items are major upgrades for Iron Man except the Dins and the Elder Maul. Next is the Theater of Blood. The unlock difficulty is technically none, but I do recommend finishing Taste of Hope for the Dragon's Medallion to get there. As for gear, you're looking at 100 mil or more. Heavy emphasis on melee gear, but you do need a bit of range and magic gear, depending on your roles later on. You want at least a Tentacle Whip, a Bandos Godsword or a Warhammer, with a Blowpipe and a Toxic Trident. At least full Void if a team is willing to take you with that. As for stats, you're looking at 90 plus magic, range, and melees. As for mechanics, far too many, so I totally recommend a guide. This raid is a static layout, so you will face the bosses in the same order every time. First is Maiden, second is Bloat, third is Nalo, fourth is Sodasek, fifth is Sarpis, and Verzik as the last boss. Each boss has a lot of mechanics, and Verzik herself has 3 phases, each with its own set of mechanics, and arguably the hardest overall part of the fights. Now, per flicking wise, you do need a moderate amount. At Verzik, you will need to adjust your prayers a lot on phase 3, and the Nalum, you will have to adjust your prayers accordingly as well. And of course, there's a ton of moving throughout. As for equip switching, you will be moderately switching to high amounts of gear switching depending on your role. When you're learning though, you're most likely going to be sticking to mostly melee gear and doing minimal switching. As for party play, you pretty much have to do this in a group. Solo is virtually impossible, especially for a beginner. World 416 is the free-for-all world though, that you can use to try your luck. But otherwise, I highly recommend joining a clan or be in a community where people could help you with that. As for rewards, Taub drops Scythe of Vitzer, a Fernic Hill Karazi Rapier, the Sanguinity Staff, and Faux Justiciar, which includes top, bottom, and the helmet. It is great money when the drops happen. All but Justiciar are major upgrades for the Iron Man, and Justiciar is decent. And finally, Tombs of Amusket, the latest raids that has come out. The unlock difficulty requires Beneath Cursed Sands quest. I do recommend getting a Ferroceptor to get here quickly. As for gear, again, you're looking at 100 mil plus. You want at least a Somrakian Hasta, or a Rapier, or Osman's Fang, with a Bandos Godsword, Toxic Trident, Blowpipe, or Full Crystal, with Farden and Bow. And stats, I recommend 90 plus magic, range, and melees. And for mechanics, there are far too many. This raid has a semi-static layout in which you can choose the order with which you can fight the first 4 bosses. They are Kefri, Zebek, Akka, and Baba in no particular order. The final boss is always Warden. Each boss has a puzzle room, and each room has various mechanics with the boss fights. This raid has an adjustable, scalable difficulty called Invocations for the bosses and the raid in general. The higher the invocation level though, the better the rewards. As for prayer flicking, you will be doing moderate to high amounts depending on your difficulty settings. Rooms like Akka, Zebek, and Warren will make you switch prayers quite a bit. As for movement, there will be a ton of moving around for all the bosses. As for equip switching, you will need to switch between all 3 styles of combat. As for party play, either is fine. Solo tends to be a bit easier unless you are extremely undergeared and you are having players to help you. And as for rewards, it drops the Tumikin Shadow, Full Missouri, the top, bottom, and the mask, Osmountain's Fang, Lightbearer, Eliden's Ward, Thread of Elidenus, and the Carrot Jewels, Sun, Breach, and Corruptor. Great money when drops happen, not bad money otherwise. All drops are considered major upgrades for Iron Man. The thread is very easy to get versus the rest of the drops, so it's pretty worth to try to grind for this thread, as you can do like level 0 TOAs, which is extremely easy compared to the normal. Section 2. The bossing ladder archetypes for account progression. Remember, I am not here to advocate for an efficient bossing ladder path that encompasses everybody. I believe that the best bossing route is different for everyone, as we all have different preferences of what's more fun and what isn't, and sometimes your opinions on certain bosses might change or certain updates happen, where you kind of need to be flexible. I will lay out though some of the best generic bossing ladders that should cover standard groups of players. Now that you know how difficult the bosses are generally and how rewarding they are, you are now properly ready to think about your bossing plans. The ultimate goal here is that you can use one of these bossing progression ladders as a reference and build your own route. If you ever get lost, you can always refer back to one of these bossing ladders. So here they are. The first bossing progression ladder route is the normal account consistent money route. The focus is about making money consistently. It's probably going to be the most popular archetype, as making money to buy better gear so that you can do stronger and more profitable bosses synergizes really well. So to read this progression ladder properly, here are the instructions. The bosses in the leftmost column of the ladder are the core bosses of interest. The bosses that are on the right side of the row are of similar difficulty, but of lesser importance for that particular ladder. For example, consistent money route, further away from the left, the less consistent the GP, and the more high risk / reward it becomes time-wise. And of course, the lower you go, the harder the bosses are, based on a combination of mechanical difficulty, time to unlock, and steeper gear requirements. The next bossing progression route is for normal accounts again, but it is team focused route. This route is all about socializing. For people that are into group iron or are just only really interested in playing RuneScape primarily to socialize, I did not forget about y'all. Secondary focus is GP followed by difficulty. The instruction for this bossing ladder is that the bosses in the left of the ladder are the core bosses of interest. The bosses that are on the right side of the row are of similar difficulty but of lesser importance. For example, further away from the left, the less likely it is to be groupable and profitable, or a combination of both. The bosses at the bottom are bosses that are a combination of overall difficulty, time to unlock, and how expensive it is to do those bosses. The third progression ladder is for normal accounts, except for people that want a bigger challenge. This round focuses on progressively getting to more challenging bosses where money is a second priority. This focuses on improving one's skill at bossing for the thrill seekers that want to chase prestige like cosmetics over money. Instructions: the bosses in the left of the column are the core bosses of interest. The bosses on the right side of the row are of similar difficulty but of lesser importance for that particular ladder. For example, further away from the left, the less mechanically challenging it will be, or less profitable, or a combination. And of course, the lower you go, the harder the bosses are, based on a combination of mechanical difficulty, time to unlock, and steeper gear requirements. And the fourth route is for Iron Man. This is the normal / what I would call the journey route progression ladder. This route focuses on item hunting for future bossing synergy. One of the most common ways to enjoy Iron Man is to work on lower bosses and obtain their unique equipment drops so that you can progress to higher level bosses more effectively. This route will probably be the most fun archetype for Iron Man players, as it blends moderate difficulty progression and maximum synergy with item grants for future bossing. This route is focused primarily on reaching 87 Slayers so you can get a Trident and do Zora for the Blowpipe, Toxic Trident, and Serphelm, allowing you to do most of the bosses after significantly easier. Here's the instructions on reading this progression ladder. The bosses in the left column of the ladder are the core bosses of interest. The bosses that are on the right side of the same row are of similar difficulty but of lesser importance for that particular ladder. For example, the further away from the left, the less important / likely the unique drops are to your primary bossing progression. And of course, the lower you go, the harder the bosses are, based on a combination of mechanical difficulty, time to unlock, and steeper gear requirements. And lastly, the Iron Account Challenging Route Bossing Progression Ladder. This route also focuses on item hunting for future bossing synergy, except this time the focus is on a tougher / riskier, but potentially quicker progression, and saving Slayer levels and Slayer bosses for much later. This route is an advanced route for those that feel ambitious and are looking for a greater mechanical challenge earlier on. This route focuses on completing some of the elves' quests to do the gauntlet until full crystal and a fully charged bow of Ferdinand. This will allow you to do most bosses significantly easier. And the instructions for reading this bossing progression is: the bosses in the left column of the ladder are the core bosses of interest. The bosses that are on the right side of the same row are of similar difficulty but of lesser importance for that particular ladder. For example, the further away from the left, the less challenging or less important the unique drops are to your primary progression. And of course, the lower you go, the harder the bosses are, based on a combination of mechanical difficulty, time to unlock, and steeper gear requirements. Here is section 3, a quick mention on combat achievements. In the bossing ladder challenge routes, I did include some of the general times that you'll probably want to look into doing combat achievements, because if you're looking for a challenge, look no further, right? The combat achievement is definitely the best way to challenge yourself in PVMing. So here's some general information. This is basically achievement diaries for those of you that don't know, but the tasks that you need to complete are all PVM based. There's 6 tiers: easy, medium, hard, elite, master, and grandmaster. Each tier provides decent reward benefits. The rewards in general are not massively game breaking, but if you do find yourself enjoying PVMing a lot and wish to test yourself ability wise at PVMing or improving your skills in PVMing, then check out the combat achievements. I would say most beginners would probably struggle past the hard tier challenges. Beyond that, you are expected to be seasoned PVMer for elite tier and above. I do have them all covered fairly extensively on my Armbar progress series, link in the description if you want to see how some of these combat achievements are. And moving on to section 4, of course, I'm going to leave you guys some good old PVM tips before I wrap up this video. There are some really important tips that you should all know that will be incredibly important to bossing in general. The first tips I'll tell you are more objective tips that are more based within the game, and I'll also cover some philosophical tips so that you can train your mind to better handle the grind. Objective tips: you want to do bosses while training Slayer. Oftentimes you train stats through Slayer and assessing Slayer bosses, but Slayer tasks can be utilized to make bossing easier, as you can wear a Slayer helm, which gives you that 15% accuracy to melee, range, and magic when it is imbued. A lot of bosses can also be done through Slayer, even the ones that are not specifically a Slayer boss. Even wilderness bosses, a good amount of them can be done through Slayer as well. In the screen, I'll post an infographic of all bosses that you can get through Slayer tasks that you can use. Next is bring a one-click teleport to bossing. If possible, you want to bring a one-click teleport when learning. It'll most likely be less tilting than dying if you can escape. If in the wilderness, I recommend C Pod from MM2 quests because it can teleport you out at level 30 or under. If you don't have that, a charged glory can do the same thing. An easy to get one-click teleport is either a house tablet or an ecto file. Next is imbue Slayer helm and rings. Imbuing certain items like the Slayer helm, Berserker ring will help a lot with bossing. It only takes a few hours of Nightmare Zone. You can also imbue them through Soul Wars and the PvP arena. Next tip is special attack weapons. Special attack weapons do help a lot at many higher level bosses, particularly bosses that have defense that can be reduced. It is recommended to bring a defense reduction weapon for them, such as Vorkath. Thanos Godsword and Giant Warhammer are usually the go-tos, but if you're broke, a Bone Dagger is actually still worth bringing. Other good special type weapons are Dragon Claws, Dragon Mace, SGS, DDS, and more. Next is get a rune pouch. Rune pouch lets you hold 3 runes, and the divine version one holds 4 when you're experienced enough to try a low level Tombs of Musket for the upgrade using the Thread of Eladinus drop. Great for pretty much all bossing and general use as well. You can store runes for things like ancient magic spells, Arceus spells, and more. Next is unlocking all spellbooks. Spellbooks are massively important for most bossing. There's the Ancient Spellbook, Arceus Spellbook, Lunar Spellbook on top of the regular spellbook. You can build an occult altar in your house to switch between the spells books conveniently, or having 99 Magic Cape, which lets you to swap 5 times a day. Most notable spells that you'll use often during bossing are Ice Barrage, Blood Barrage, Vengeance, Death Charge, and Thralls. Next is unlocking all the prayers available. Getting to 77 prayer is really useful because it will massively speed up bossing when you unlock these prayers. Piety from King's Ransom Quest, Augury from Arcane Prayer Scroll, and Rigor from the Dexterous Prayer Scroll, which can be obtained from rates 1 or bought from the G. Next is furnishing your player-owned house. Getting to at least 82 construction to boost for a rejuvenation pool, fairy rings, and the occult altar is super helpful for bossing. There are a good amount of bosses where strategies involve going to your house often to reset your stats between kills, like Sire, KQ, Vorcat strategies are a great example. Next is unlocking gear and rewards from minigames, quests, and diaries that are usually untradeable. Things like Salve Amulet and Dragon Defender are essentially free best in slot items, so definitely work on getting those. Refer to the previous PVM Bible video for a refresher on all those items. Next is learning to use F keys. F keys let you switch to different tabs quickly, like your inventory to prayer and back. Very useful for high level bosses. If you don't like F keys, you can actually remap your F keys to other keys using key remapping on the RuneLite client, or if you have a mouse with like different extra buttons, you can remap it there too. Next is learning some basic prayer flicking. Prayer flicking is an advanced skill set which can result in massive benefits for bossing. There are various techniques of prayer flicking, and the most useful and easy one to learn is called the one-take prayer flicking, where you can keep prayers up and not have it drained by turning your prayers, or using the prayer orb option, turning it on and off every 0.6 seconds. I won't go in depth as it's not very necessary for general bossing, but good to keep in mind when you are more seasoned and want to push your skills further for harder bossing challenges like combat achievements or other custom challenges. Finally, utilize plugins on RuneLite / officially recognized clients. It's no secret, clients like RuneLite give a ton of quality of life to everything you do in RS, even bossing. Things like tile markers, menu entry swapper, and tile movement indicators can help you learn bossing easier. However, you probably shouldn't over-rely on too many plugins, as it could ruin your immersion, so only use what you feel like is necessary and don't go overboard. And plus, it's always good to be competent at bossing on your own without having to rely on a client feature. Next, we're going to cover philosophical tips. First is lowering your expectations on quick success. Never assume you're going to learn any bossing content quickly. If that is your expectation, you will probably get angry quickly and perhaps give up quickly too. Taper your expectations. Many bosses take 50 to 100 kills to get comfortable, and hundreds and thousands to really say you can master it. Next is watch out for content creator / veteran player biases. If you are watching a veteran PVMer, chances are many don't remember the perspective of being a noob learning the ropes, so they might say it's easy when you're legit having a rough time at the moment. Remember, they all struggle at one point as well, but they've mostly forgotten that. So don't be frustrated that you're not as good as the veterans. It takes practice for everybody. Next is deaths are part of the learning process. Expect deaths. Every death is one step closer to figuring out the boss, so take it as a learning opportunity rather than a setback. It will help you learn quicker and reduce stress. Next is it's more about the journey than the destination. RS is a very grindy game, so chances are it might be your first time playing a game that takes hours to do even the simplest things. However, that is what makes it so rewarding compared to other games. You will experience rewards in RS where the satisfaction tends to be far higher than most games if you can tough it out. Most bosses, whether it's learning or getting a big drop, can take many hours. Some may take tens of hours, but it's about the journey, so enjoy the process. And finally, research your bosses. Just like you're doing now by looking at this guide, you should always go through some guides on YouTube, for example, or ask people in communities like French chats or Twitch for some advice. But I recommend you research a bit and try out the bosses. Most likely, you'll need some time to digest all the info, so practice and research back and forth is the best for results. And that's about it, guys. I'll leave you guys with some final words. Feel free to share this video or the Word version with anybody, and I will try to update this if something big changes that would impact the nature of the guide, of course in the comments, description, or in the Word version. And of course, you can always reach out to me if you need help with more questions regarding this topic. You can find me most likely on my Discord, link in the description, or my Twitch when I'm streaming, or in the comments. And you can also access the French chat at Mr. Iron Bar, and we also have a clan called the Rice Fields that you can apply to as well if you need some help through our community sources. And that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you want to see what I'm up to on my accounts, definitely subscribe so you can catch up with my progress. Mostly it's going to be Mr. Iron Bar, and sometimes it'll be things like leagues or maybe a unique account with a short-term goal. Anyways, have a good rest of the year. See ya. This video will be broken up into a few sections, and if you are watching this for the second time, you can easily jump to the correct section if you just hover your mouse on the timeline of the video at the bottom, and also in the description of the video. Welcome to the guide where I will teach you on how to get into bossing in old school RuneScape, so you can enjoy and experience a major part of the game and create an awesome account. I believe I have the insight to best guide you. Here is a bit about me if you are new. I have spent thousands of hours bossing throughout my many years of RuneScape since 2005. You may have heard of my Iron Man account named Mr. Iron Bar. I've done pretty much every PVM extensively and collected most of the major drops on that account. I have spent a lot of time on this guide, so if you do find this guide to be helpful to you, please consider liking the video. Part 1. General Guidelines. So the first guide is going to cover the pre-bossing checklist, the main things you need to focus and work on before you can reach the bossing stages. The main components would be questing, which includes stuff like diaries and minigames, money making, gearing, and finally training. Order is not too important, but if you must follow something, I recommend something like this. Also note that the order is more of a loose idea because a lot of these components end up happening at the same time. But in general, all accounts typically focus on questing as a first priority, as it unlocks new areas, gives fast levels, and unlocks important gear. After questing, you will be mixing in money making, gearing, and training at the same time. For example, you need money to buy gear, and you need gear so you can train. This applies to both normal and Iron Man mode. For Iron Man mode though, money is less significant because you must get some gear as a drop rather than buying it from the GE. Let's talk about the questing and miscellaneous grinds as the first component. You're going to have to do quests. No escaping this one, but luckily there's guides out on YouTube like Slayer Music's video quest guides. Also, RuneLite has the Quest Helper plugin, which makes questing brain dead easy as it just shows where you need to click. It's my preferred one. The only quests that may be challenging are the ones with boss fights like Dragon Slayer 2, Monkey Madness 2, and something else. But those are also pretty easy with the proper guides and setup. I will put additional links to help you with those more difficult ones in the description. The bulk of your questing is going to be completing all the recipe for disaster quests for unlocking the Barrow's Gloves. Barrow's Gloves is the overall best gloves in the game, and completing the quest will unlock a ton of important content for bossing, like Ancient Magics. Recipe for Disaster requires 175 quest points. 86 of them comes from working towards the quest itself, so you need to do 89 quest points worth of outside quests. Over half of all available quests will be done by this point. Quest order don't matter too much, but if you want something to guide you, I'll have a link in the description for you to roughly follow. Also, the page that I will be linking in the description is handy for showing you all the overall benefits of certain quests, like certain teleports like Ectophile or like certain non-combat XP. Don't worry too much about the quest order. You can definitely nitpick and do it your own way, because you're not really going to save that much time doing it a particular way, so don't worry about it. As long as you get the points for the gloves, you're good. Now, I'm going to mention some specific quests that are really important for unlocking certain bosses and certain items, so let's cover the quest to unlock certain bosses. Here we go. Dragon Slayer 2 unlocks Vorkath, it's a medium high level boss. Monkey Madness 2 unlocks Demonic Grills, which is a medium level, somewhat of a boss. Some of the elves unlock the Gauntlet and the corrupted version, which is considered mostly high level. Regicide, which unlocks Zora, is a medium to high level boss. Priest of Peril unlocks Mauritania region, which further unlocks the Barrows minigame, which is a low level boss. Theater of Blood, high level boss, and the Nightmare, high level boss. Now I'm going to cover certain quests that you should do to unlock certain items in certain spellbooks. We have Animal Magnetism, which unlocks the Ava's Accumulator, one of your best range capes in the game. And we have Lost City, which unlocks Dragon Dagger, which is a very affordable special attack melee weapon. Hero's Quest, which unlocks Dragon Battle Axe, which is a really good special weapon for boosting your strength bonus. Monkey Madness unlocks Dragon Scimitar, one of your most reliable training melee weapons. Elemental Workshops 1 and 2 unlocks Elemental and Mind Shield for Wyvern tasks. Haunted Mine and Tarn Razorlord minigame unlocks the Salve Amulet and its enchanted version. Mage Arena 1 and 2 minigame unlocks the God Cape and the Imbue version as well. Warrior Guild Cyclops, you kill them for the Metal Defenders up to the Dragon Defender. Freemanic Trials for Berserker Helmet, Freemanic Isles for the Natus Helmet. They're all best in slot melee helms according to their levels. Underground Pass, which unlocks Iban's Staff, so you can use the Iban's Blast, very powerful mage spell at level 50 mage. Heart from the Deep gives God Books, good prayer bonus, and you can use it for Godward's protection. Slug Menace, which unlocks Proselyte Armor, which is really good prayer bonus armor for certain combat scenarios like Slayer Training. Death Plateau for climbing boots, early melee boots. Family Crest for Chaos Gauntlets, really good for early mage training. Desert Treasure unlocks Ancient Magics, and for Iron Man you can get an Ancient Staff to auto-cast your ancient spells. And Lunar Diplomacy, which unlocks the Lunar Spellbook for stuff like Vengeance, Cure Me spell. And there's some additional quests that Iron Man have to do because you have to get those items as a drop. So we have Cabin Fever for the Black Mass drop, of course for Slayer tasks from the Cave Hearts. Lost Tribe, which unlocks Dorgeshan Crossbow, really good early range training weapon. Taurus Trap, so that you can actually make darts for your eventual blowpipe. And I also want to mention Sins of Father, so you can get the Blood Shard. Because this guide is meant for beginner PVMers, I just assume you're probably learning how to do a lot of bosses eventually. And the Blood Shard is really good to get for learning melee bossing like bandos, stuff like that. Now let me cover some diary rewards that you can do to better prepare for bossing. I will say the diaries are nowhere near as important as the questing themselves, just because the diaries, a lot of the good rewards, tend to take a lot longer to get ready for. Here's the notable ones. Artie Easy Diary, you should get this early probably for the Artie Cloak. It's a really good cape for just traveling and like prayer restoration. It's also near Fairy Ring, so super nice. And you have the Desert Heart and Lee Diaries. This gives you permanent ropes and shortcut to the Calphite Queen, so this is a much later one. Mauritania Hard Diary for the Bone Crusher for prayer XP and 50% more runes from Barrows chest. Pretty good for like mid-level stage when you start doing Barrows. And you have the Western Hard Diary for the Elite Void top and bottom, which makes your Void a little bit stronger. And also the Crystal Halberd as well, which is good for like high level PVMing. And you also get one Zora Revive a day, so nice to have for Zora. Faldor Hard Diary gives your shield the locate option for Giant Mo, which is pretty nice for... Freemake Elite Diary is really good for the noted Dagonoth King's Bones, so if you plan on doing a lot of Dagonoths, at some point definitely think about getting that one, because the bones are a lot of money, or a lot of prayer XP. Kandarin Hard Diary increases your chance of enchanted bolts activating its effect, like diamond bolts going from 10% proc rate to like 11%. pretty good for long-term bossing. There's a bunch of other small ones that are related to PVM, but I'm not going to mention them. They're not too important. If you want a full list, I will put a link in the description though that shows all the rewards. So the next component we're going to talk about is training. Training your combat stats is going to be essential to bossing preparations. Now, obviously, there's different difficulties of bosses, and of course, the stat requirements will be a bit different. For example, barrels is quite doable at like 60 range and magic for the casual player. And for like endgame bossing, I highly recommend you eventually get base 90s, all melee magic range, and for prayer at least 77, preferably higher. But yeah, that's the gist of it. I will explain more about stats requirement for each of the bosses when I cover it on the second guide, the bossing ladder guide, in the future. If you are unsure of what combat stat to train first, as in you don't have a preference, I would recommend training melee first, or focusing a bit more on melee, as it is overall the easiest of the 3 styles, and plus you have to train more skills for that single style. Whereas magic is just magic, range is just range, melee is attack, strength, and defense as well. Before you commit to some serious long-term training though, I definitely recommend you rush some early quests that can really speed up some early levels in your combat related stats. I recommend rushing the following quests: Waterfall Quest, Vampire Slayer, Death Plateau, Fight Arena, Grand Tree, Tree Gnome Village, Merlin's Crystal, Holy Grail, Witch's House, and Dragon Slayer. And maybe a few other ones that might come out in the future, or I might have missed, but those ones are really notable ones. If you do these quests, you'll probably get like base 40s and like melees and like 30 plus prayer or something like that. So yeah, it's really worth it. Skips a lot of training, which does save a bit of time. So how does training usually work? There is different styles, I would say. There's like the AFK style, there's the active style, and there's a mix of a bit of both. AFK methods is pretty straightforward. You just let your character auto-retaliate at a certain place and train that way. So you can read a book, watch a show, do homework on the side. So the AFK style involves training at a few key places. You can AFK for 5 to 10 minutes at a time before having to look at the game. The first spot is Sand Crabs in southern Hosidius, which is a part of the Zaya region. They are the best low-level AFK spot for all combat styles. You can train there as early as you want. Just go to a spot that has 2 to 3 crabs and AFK away in the middle. If you lose aggro, just go far away and come back. Another spot is the island you can get to with the boat in the same area that costs 10,000 GP. You could technically get max stats here, but I don't recommend it. Now the next spot is Ammonite crabs. They're basically sand crabs, but they require the completion of Bon Voyage quests, which takes a bit of grinding to access, but they are better XP per hour because they have higher HP. They're located in the northern parts of Fossil Island. Same strat as sand crabs, just hug a bunch of them and be in the middle. So the final spot that I recommend is the Nightmare Zone minigame. It's quite complicated, so yeah, listen carefully. You have to complete at least 5 quests that have bosses to use this content. The 5 minimum quest suggestions are Ascent of Arceus, Vampire Slayer, Depths of Despair, Lost City, and Tree Gnome Village. Basically, Nightmare Zone will generate the bosses that you fought from quests so that you can fight them. And these are the best ones for training. I recommend getting at least 70 base stats before using this Nightmare Zone. For the first trip of Nightmare Zone, you will need to use prayer potions to block damage. Once you accumulate enough Nightmare Zone points, you can buy and use absorption potions, which will negate damage from the bosses, allowing you to AFK for very long periods. You want to have a Rock Cake or a DS2 located orb for Nightmare Zone. Rock Cake is the easiest to get. With a combination of Rock Cake or the Locator Orb combined with the Overload Potion, you can get yourself to 1 HP. Absorption Potion